Audiobook title Sorcery Monarch 01 to 359 by Falcon Npar 05. The soldiers had shown remarkable adaptability. With the advantageous terrain, superior equipment, desperate determination, generous rewards, and the aid of potions, they also had the courage scrolls cast by Adam Smith to boost their morale. They managed to hold off the weakened test subjects' relentless attacks. Boom! Another fireball exploded. The spreading flames rained down, scattering embers and illuminating the dark misty swamp with bright light. Matthew lowered his staff with a slight sense of regret. The mist still obscured the enemy's full numbers. Silently he turned and left, speaking calmly to a tense Adam Smith. Do it. A cold breeze blew, carrying the acrid stench of charred flesh and the rotten odor of the swamp, but none of it fazed Bloodhand Khan. He gazed at the remaining half of the test subjects, his face hidden under the mask devoid of emotion. The flickering red light, even from 200 or 300 meters away, penetrated the thick mist and revealed faint images. The 11th fireball spell. Bloodhand Khan no longer bothered to wonder why this arcanist had such extraordinary endurance in battle. He had only one thought left: if the enemy eliminates 2/3 of the test subjects, retreat without hesitation. He suddenly looked up after silently counting to 200, noticing the absence of any more fireball explosions. Finally out of firepower, or are they setting a trap? These thoughts briefly crossed Bloodhand Khan's mind. Then he saw a bright light rise from the distant mist. The enemy was using alchemical oil again. This time, Bloodhand Khan didn't hesitate. He drank a bottle of green potion, his voice shifting into a beastly growl as he roared, "Attack with all your might." His voice grew more and more savage as he spoke, sounding increasingly like an enraged beast. The last traces of his rational mind burned away in a fury, leaving behind only a fading echo. 200 barrels of alchemical oil consumed, 80 fireball scrolls used, the soldier's potion supply at its limit. You are all doomed. Roar. Bloodhand Khan's body, along with his mount, began to distort and mutate. His body instantly swelled, blood pouring out like a fountain back at the temporary camp. Matthew faintly sensed something. He glanced at the busy kobolds before turning to leave the tent. The roaring flames engulfed the entire camp perimeter, continuously scorching the advancing test subjects. These mindless creatures charged into the fire like moths to a flame, only to perish one after another. The soldiers, fatigued and under heavy pressure, immediately felt relieved. Especially when they saw Matthew step out of the tent once again, every soldier couldn't help but cheer. Matthew, his face calm, looked at their excited faces but couldn't help feeling a bit tense. At first, he had only intended this as a lesson to draw the snake out of its hole. Everyone here was bait. Although they were aware of this, almost all of them chose this path and fought desperately to survive. That's why we will win. Roar. The deafening roar ripped through the thick mist, echoing throughout the entire camp. Matthew turned to see the massive figure emerging from the flames, his eyes widening in surprise. Bloodhand Khan, challenge level 15+, high tier peak. Chapter 139, Death of the Double. Chapter 139, Death of the Double. Seeing Bloodhand Khan, Matthew wasn't surprised. Given that Khan belonged to the Pfizer Merchant Guild and had been active in the Eastern Province for an unknown amount of time, encountering him again was highly probable. However, Matthew never expected Bloodhand Khan's power to increase so rapidly. From a heavily wounded, dying mid-tier warrior to a terrifying high-tier peak existence in just 2 months. Such a leap in power was even more dramatic than Matthew pouring all his experience points into leveling up. But the data quickly provided Matthew with the answer, revealing more detailed information. Name: Bloodhand Khan. Species: deeply infected test subject, 1/3 human, 1/3 fae, 1/3 demon. Challenge level 16+. Talents: deep berserk, leadership. Specialties: advanced specialty death harvest LV1. Each kill in combat grants +1 temporary damage, up to a maximum of 10 points. Advanced specialty weakness insight LV1, +10 to perception checks on enemy vital points and weak spots, deals 15 extra damage to those weak spots. Skills: advanced skill fear aura LV1, releases a fear check of willpower -5 within 30 meters to all enemies. Upon a failed check, enemies enter a fear state, reducing all attributes by 1/3. Advanced skill flesh symbiosis LV1, bonds with a creature of equal or lesser challenge level, sharing HP and shifting into a battle form. Inheritance: none. Attributes: strength, 23 agility, 14 constitution, 20 intelligence, 4 perception, 14 charisma, 16 luck, -4. Evaluation: the entire world loathes you. 2 months and you've stopped being human. Glancing at Bloodhand Khan's grotesque bloodline, Matthew surmised that he had undergone some horrific transformation. As expected of the Pfizer Merchant Guild, one of the best at future flesh modifications. Beyond his extraordinary strength and constitution, what concerned Matthew most was Bloodhand Khan's radically inhuman body. His upper body, towering over 2 meters tall, was muscular and powerfully built. His lower half had fused with a 6-legged warhorse. His entire form was bulging with muscle, covered in a blood-fueled armor, radiating heat as it underwent further unknown modifications. He now appeared as a 4-meter-tall centaur-like monster, exuding a bloody aura, radiating death and carnage. His grotesque head bore backward-curving black horns. His gaping maw, filled with sharp fangs, released a series of bone-chilling roars. Over 1/4 of the defending soldiers, even under the boost of the courage aura, couldn't help but fall into a state of fear. They couldn't even muster the courage to look at Bloodhand Khan. Matthew stood calmly on the hillside, unfazed by Khan's terrifying presence. The monstrous creature glared at Matthew with blood-red, bulging eyes. His mind was entirely gone, and his intelligence had been reduced to nothing more than battle instincts and a lust for bloodshed. Yet one thought transcended his broken mind, compelling him forward: kill this Arcanist. Roar! To everyone's disbelief, Bloodhand Khan charged through the thick alchemical oil, heedless of the burning flames, relentlessly driving toward Matthew. Behind him, the knights, also transformed and monstrous, howled as they tore through the firewalls. Each one was ablaze, their bodies sizzling with the sound of burning flesh, resembling knights straight out of hell. However, the unforgiving flames did not yield to their will. As these monstrosities charged through the fire, some silently collapsed, consumed by the flames. As everyone stood in shock, Adam Smith suddenly roared, "Fire the crossbows." "Don't stop!" The crossbowmen snapped out of their stupor, sweating profusely as they realized their only chance to survive was to keep fighting. Kill or be killed. Thick crossbow bolts felled one monstrous knight after another, aided by the flames that ensured they stayed down for good. But even the 4 or 5 meter high walls of fire couldn't stop all the monstrous knights. They charged forward, following Bloodhand Khan's lead, breaking through the walls of flame at the cost of over 100 dead knights. They crashed into the walls ahead of the weakened test subjects. The ironwood walls, as tough as steel, were dented and torn apart by the impact. Blood-stained holes were left behind, with some knights still trying to climb upward. But they were quickly crushed into twisted masses of flesh by their comrades behind them. The walls shook violently, and Adam Smith urgently ordered the soldiers to retreat. Then he watched in horror as the massive Bloodhand Khan rammed into the walls. Boom! The walls shattered, chunks of stone flew in every direction. Amid the billowing dust, the monstrous creature lifted its head and roared furiously. One of its horns was broken, one of its horse legs was crippled, and sharp fragments of red bone protruded from its wounds, making it even more terrifyingly savage. Matthew raised his hand to stop Beelzebub, taking control of the remaining 14 clay golems, and advanced. Bam! With just a swing, Bloodhand Khan's axe cleaved open a clay golem's chest, splitting it into pieces. Instant kill. Bloodhand Khan's axe, glowing with a dark aura, was clearly a high-level magical weapon. Matthew remained unfazed, continuing to direct the clay golems to surround Bloodhand Khan. The golem's powerful fists struck him repeatedly, but they barely fazed him. The berserk monster kept retaliating viciously, his superhuman strength destroying one golem after another. The remaining golems tried to grapple and restrain him, but they were quickly overpowered and thrown aside. Dense volleys of crossbow bolts flew past Bloodhand Khan's massive form, taking down the monster knights that tried to breach the walls. Beelzebub gripped his battle axe tightly, his breathing heavy, but Matthew remained calm as he said, "Your main task is to hold this breach. Leave this monster to me." Matthew advanced with the last few clay golems, all eyes watching in horror as he approached Bloodhand Khan, who had already destroyed several golems. Noticing Matthew's approach, Bloodhand Khan became agitated, his blood-red eyes locked on him as he roared repeatedly. Seizing the moment, 2 golems charged forward, forcing Bloodhand Khan to retreat. Matthew directed 3 golems to block the breach Khan had created. Bloodhand Khan, pushing aside the 2 shattered golems, charged straight at Matthew. In an astonishing display, a golem lifted Matthew into the air and hurled him beyond the walls. Matthew crashed hard into the water below, landing painfully as the test subjects rushed toward him. He closed his eyes calmly. It Hurts, Chapter 140. Victory of Arcane, Chapter 140. Victory of Arcane. Bloodhand Khan charged madly forward, cutting down and tearing apart more than a dozen monster knights along the way. But he gained nothing. The terrifying monster spiraled into complete madness, drawn to the scent of blood and flesh, turning to charge toward the camp. Any monsters in his path were cleaved in half with a single swing of his axe. In just a few dozen meters, Bloodhand Khan had killed nearly 100 monsters. His wild roars turned him into a true beast, once again slaughtering his way to the walls. Witnessing his rampage, the soldiers defending the walls felt an overwhelming sense of despair and fear. The Arcanist had sacrificed himself. The walls were broken. Who would save them now? This time, standing before him was Beelzebub. Clang! Two massive axes collided, sending a jolt of pain through Beelzebub's hands as blood surged in his chest. He didn't retreat, standing firmly at the breach, his eyes bloodshot. Summoning all his strength, Beelzebub took a deep breath and swung his axe once more at the charging Bloodhand Khan. Bam! The terrifying impact tore through Beelzebub's chest, and he spat out a mouthful of blood as his body was sent flying. He crashed heavily to the ground, his head spinning, his vision blurred, and his heart filled with unwillingness. Is it always like this? Am I doomed to fail? Unspeakable rage surged through Beelzebub's mind. An indescribable force rose from within his body. He roared in fury, struggling to his feet, dragging his bloodied axe, standing once more in front of Bloodhand Khan. Bam! Before he could strike, his body was flung away again, crashing to the ground near the tents. Anger alone could not create miracles. The berserk Bloodhand Khan, his twisted hooves thundering forward, was about to bring his axe down on the fallen Beelzebub. The surrounding soldiers saw this and trembled in fear. The armored barbarian soldiers prepared to rush forward. But monster knights emerging from the breach held them at bay. As Bloodhand Khan closed in on Beelzebub, Adam Smith, sword in hand, desperately charged forward. Beelzebub continued coughing up blood, feeling his strength slipping away, his pupils dilating. Just as despair overcame him, a voice laced with a hint of amusement entered his ears. Well done, now rest. As the words fell, a refreshing cool energy enveloped Beelzebub, stabilizing his injuries. The last thing Beelzebub saw before he lost consciousness was a dark green arcane light landing on Bloodhand Khan, immediately weakening his terrifying aura. A red light shot out. With a loud boom, the breach was engulfed, and the monster knights were swallowed by the explosion. A familiar cloaked figure appeared before him. A look of astonishment flashed in Beelzebub's eyes before he passed out. Rubbing his slightly sore neck, Matthew watched the rampaging Bloodhand Khan approach and said to Yaya, who was ready to strike, "He's yours." The second circle spell enfeeblement had already taken effect, temporarily reducing Bloodhand Khan's strength by 3 points, making him vulnerable to Yaya. In his current state, Bloodhand Khan possessed strength and combat prowess, but lacked any form of intelligence. He was a perfect punching bag and opponent, ideal for Yaya to gain experience. The graceful Yaya lifted her head, showing no fear against the hulking Bloodhand Khan. She darted forward with lightning speed. Bloodhand Khan instinctively swung his massive axe at the charging Yaya. A strange hunger, gluttony, rose in his mind. Eat so bam! The axe missed, carving a deep gash in the ground. Yaya gracefully veered in midair, dodging the blow and speeding towards Bloodhand Khan's back, sinking her teeth into him. Crunch! Yaya ripped away a large chunk of flesh, and as Bloodhand Khan howled in pain and attempted to retaliate, she flapped her wings and soared into the sky, diving again. Bam! The impact staggered Bloodhand Khan, forcing him to take 2 steps back. He swung his axe wildly, but he couldn't land a hit on the agile Yaya. What had given him an advantage before, his massive size, was now his downfall. With her agility now at 17 points, and her combat prowess further enhanced by her bloodline, Yaya's already impressive close combat abilities had grown even stronger. If Bloodhand Khan had any sense left, he would have been frustrated. His fear aura, once a trump card, had no effect on Yaya. And the draconic presence Yaya exuded slowed his movements even further. Nearly all his attacks failed to reach Yaya. No matter how powerful his attacks, they were useless if they couldn't hit the target. The safety provided by Matthew's illusion allowed Yaya to experiment freely with attacks, gaining combat experience at an astonishing rate. Her teeth became sharper and her body grew stronger. The memories in her bloodline merged with her combat experience. Under Matthew's amazed gaze, Yaya even gained a new specialty. Intermediate specialty combat mastery, +2 to close combat reaction, +2 to attack, +2 to defense. Indeed, combat was the best medicine for growth. With the illusion to protect her, Yaya would soon see even more battle opportunities. Soon, Yaya discovered another weakness of Bloodhand Khan, his already crippled hind leg. As Bloodhand Khan swung his axe to turn, Yaya, who had been in front of him, vanished from sight in a flash of her black ring, and reappeared silently behind him. Crunch! Her sharp teeth bit through the thick knee joint of his horse-like leg. Bloodhand Khan staggered, his bulky form becoming even more unstable. Clever Yaya had unknowingly lured Bloodhand Khan back to the breach in the walls. Only then did the soldiers finally notice the figure of Matthew emerging from the swarm of monsters. The Arcanist is unharmed. How is that possible? I clearly saw him. I get it. That was just the Arcanist's illusion magic. Think about it, didn't the Arcanist enter the tent earlier and then come out again? Oh, and after that he didn't cast any more spells. That's right. This is the wisdom of the Arcanist. The Arcanist fooled that monster and us too. Idiot. If we weren't fooled, how could it have worked on him? Announcement: a big thank you to Brennan for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 141, Bloodhend Khan, kill one of me. Chapter 141, Bloodhend Khan, kill one of me. Matthew heard their murmurs and thought they were getting ahead of themselves. The battle wasn't over yet. Though he was complaining inwardly, Matthew couldn't help but smile as he raised his staff high, under everyone's excited gazes. The long-missed fireball shot out, whistling through the air, exploding with a boom among the monsters. The arcane bombardment descended. Boom! One fireball after another was released, familiar to the soldiers and adventurers. They unleashed terrifying destructive power, tearing apart the packed monsters and experiment subjects. In just a few dozen breaths, over 20 fireballs exploded, killing or severely injuring hundreds of monsters. The pressure on the defense immediately lessened. What excited Adam Smith even more was dozens of mutated clay golems emerged from the tents, stomping with heavy steps. These clay golems were larger, clad in metal armor, their defenses even more formidable. Where did they come from? A flash of the teleportation formation crossed Adam Smith's mind, and hearing the excited discussions among the soldiers and adventurers, he immediately realized. Whatever method the Arcanist used, I should keep it a secret and not pry. Even though the battle wasn't over yet, Adam Smith had already made up his mind. From now on, he would focus on learning and training. If he couldn't gain great combat power, at least he wouldn't remain a weak link for others to exploit. While Adam Smith was thinking, the mutated clay golems, stomping with heavy steps, smashed into the walls. The experiment subjects that had just climbed up slashed at their chests with claws, only to create a few sparks on the thick metal armor. Bam! The spiked iron fists crushed bones and sinews of the experiment subjects. Some that were hit directly in the head collapsed instantly, their twisted bodies going limp. The remaining experiment subjects scrambled to climb, but were thrown back down after colliding with the mutated clay golems. As soon as the mutated clay golems appeared, they used their overwhelming strength and size, swinging heavy fists to suppress the experiment subjects' assault. The heavily burdened, heavy-armored soldiers finally retreated. They watched the enormous forms of nearly 50 mutated clay golems, a touch of complexity in their eyes. If their territory possessed such powerful war machines, what need was there for them? Matthew didn't care about their thoughts. Even if he knew, he couldn't be bothered to explain. There were other plans for these tools. Seeing that the lines were temporarily stabilized, he discreetly observed a few spies among the adventurers, finding that they were also fighting hard. It was clear that the terrifying methods and cruel actions of the enemy, led by Bloodhend Khan, had even unsettled these planted spies, who wouldn't fear allies suddenly going mad. Of course, there was also a small possibility that these spies were still putting on a show. Matthew didn't care what these adventurers were thinking. As long as the battle remained stable, he had no intention of acting against them. Keeping them around might prove useful later. As the mutated clay golems blocked the breach and firmly guarded the walls, the defensive formation was re-established. The soldiers and adventurers returned to their positions, unleashing their full combat capabilities. The once tedious and numbing battle now seemed a blessing after the life-and-death ordeal. However, many were still anxious about Bloodhend Khan, who was still rampaging in the camp. But now, Bloodhend Khan no longer had the violent and terrifying ferocity he did at the beginning. With Matthew's continuous enfeeblement, slow and grease spells, he hadn't even touched Yaya. His left arm was completely severed, 3 of his 6 legs were crippled, and his body was covered in gushing wounds. Even his once powerful roars were now weak and filled with fatigue. Roar! Bloodhend Khan let out a final, feeble roar as Yaya severed yet another leg, his entire body collapsing, unable to rise again. Seeing that Bloodhend Khan had lost the ability to fight, his twisted, grotesque form slowly dissolved under Matthew's gaze. The eerie transformation made Matthew's pupils contract slightly as he instinctively checked for detailed explanation. Bloodline disintegration in progress, maximum life points reduced, strength weakening, this creature is nearing death. The information made Matthew pause in silence before he chuckled, raising his staff and launching a Melf's acid arrow, piercing Bloodhend Khan's head. No need to let him die on his own. The information, data, and experience points, I'm taking them all. Ding! You have killed Bloodhend Khan and gained 5,000 experience points, 51,000, and 3 skill points, 16. Ding. You have changed the fate of 500 people and earned 300 fate coins, 6,000. Ding. Your fate attribute has permanently increased by 1. The unexpected fate rewards confirmed to Matthew that the dead monster was indeed Bloodhend Khan. Feeling an odd sense of melancholy, He reflected on how someone who could have grown to a high-level legendary or demigod level had died in the swamp's mud. Fate truly plays with people. His eyes focused, and as he watched Bloodhin Khan's body dissolve into a pool of blood, Matthew's resolve grew stronger. No matter what the future holds, I will hold my fate in my own hands. Matthew didn't know why Bloodhin Khan had turned into such a monstrous form, but it wasn't hard to guess that it was the handiwork of the Pfizer Guild. Judging by this, if their attempt has failed this time, next time they will undoubtedly strike with full force. Or perhaps their true goal has already been achieved. Matthew had initially thought of making the situation here public but quickly reconsidered. If the events here were revealed, it might only attract more unwanted attention toward him. After all, an arcanist capable of casting dozens of fireballs would inevitably draw much interest. What Matthew didn't realize was, his low-key development plan happened to align perfectly with someone else's decision. Zaylan, Blood Moon City outside the Redwood Manor. The territory of the Bacon family. The ground was littered with corpses, the stench of blood thick in the air. Lark watched as his troops broke through the castle's final defenses, storming inside for massacre, a cold smile creeping across his lips. Collaborating with you useless fools has been such a waste of time. But thanks to your stupidity, I didn't have to pay too high a price to solve this problem. Just then, the tall figure standing beside Lark suddenly trembled slightly. Under the lingering light of the blood moon, the once iron-faced Bloodhand Khan now showed signs of confusion and twisted pain, before it finally returned to calm. He hesitated for a moment, rubbing his chin, and curiously asked Lark beside him, "I've died, but how did you know we would fail?" Twirling a golden coin between his fingers and stroking its intricate engravings, the handsome yet cold and indifferent Lark replied softly, "Mr. Sora told me he couldn't locate the fate trajectory of Bay territory." Chapter 142, High-Rank Warrior Beelzebub. Chapter 142, High-Rank Warrior Beelzebub. The crimson moon sank below the horizon. Its red afterglow slowly dissipated. Pale dawn light began to emerge on the far horizon. The battle was finally nearing its end. Occasional bowstrings twanged, echoing through the smoke-filled temporary camp. The uninjured mutated clay golems were performing a final cleanup of the corpse piles and any surviving monsters. Fierce flames surged up again. Black smoke rolled into the thick mist. Corpses piled up, waiting to be burned, exuding a nauseating stench. The refugees, who had been on edge all night, began their work again. Their task was heavy, to flatten the slopes on the hill and lay the groundwork for future buildings. Hardly anyone had slept well, but they worked with determination. Last night's battle and victory showed them they had found a safe place to settle. A strong force that could provide safety was far more effective than promises they hadn't yet seen. Adam Smith anxiously burned all the bodies while grimly tallying the losses. Though they had won the battle, the Thorn Merchant caravan had paid a heavy price. All 20 clay golems were destroyed. 35 guards dead. 6 elite guards dead. What pained Adam Smith even more than the losses in manpower was the accumulated cost, over 100,000 worth of supplies. Although most of the resources belonged to Bay territory and its lord. Adam Smith, having tied himself closely to Bay territory, felt that the inexplicable battle's losses would severely impact its development. He mulled over how to report this bad news to the Lord, with the proper worried expression. In the tent at the center of the camp, Matthew thoughtfully observed the unconscious Beelzebub. Unconscious, bloodline awakening in progress. Last night's battle had become a unique key, unlocking a special door within Beelzebub. Bloodline power. Having witnessed the power of true dragon bloodlines, Matthew was awed by Beelzebub's chance to gain such an ability. However, it was clear that Beelzebub lacked the strength and preparation to fully activate his bloodline on his own. Data analysis revealed to Matthew that Beelzebub was facing 3 possible outcomes. First possibility, bloodline awakening failure, 97% chance. Strength greatly reduced and the difficulty of future awakenings doubles. Second possibility, bloodline awakening success 2, 9% chance. Strength surges but lingering side effects will take a year and a half to recover from. Third possibility, bloodline awakening and evolution 0, 1% chance. Strength and potential greatly increase. Note, selecting this option costs 1,000 fate coins and 20,000 experience points to achieve perfection. Matthew rubbed his temples, finally understanding. Even in this world, money, resources, and even one's origin were essential. The poor, relying on mutations, were already limited in their potential. Bloodline awakening and evolution, the same option that would likely cost Matthew or Yea far fewer resources. Because of Beelzebub's limited talent, the process from nothing to something was particularly difficult. Staring at Beelzebub's unconscious face, Matthew helplessly sighed. "All right, I suppose it's like buying a prized horse at a high price. Despite his words, Matthew's smile betrayed his satisfaction. Now he no longer had to worry about a lack of talent among his subordinates. A radiant blue light surrounded the slumbering Beelzebub. The thin force within him rapidly grew denser. Under Matthew's careful watch, it gradually transformed Beelzebub's body. Bone density increased, and his already large frame grew even more. Matthew predicted that, once fully transformed, Beelzebub would stand at 5 meters tall. Along with his bones, his skin, muscles, nerves, and even internal organs were strengthened. Their density and resilience increased astonishingly, giving Matthew a wealth of insights. The mysterious force worked as though programmed, steadily fortifying Beelzebub's body. This time, Matthew could observe more closely. The tiny blue lights of experience points and fate coins primarily concentrated in active areas. It felt to Matthew as if Beelzebub's bloodline power was the program's code. Experience points served as the universal material to realize and strengthen that code. As for fate coins, they acted as the stabilizers, ensuring the plan proceeded smoothly, without uncertainty. Combined, the three elements advanced Beelzebub's bloodline activation and evolution. Matthew committed every detail of the process to memory, pondering with anticipation. Does this mean that if I can decipher the principles and specifics of bloodline enhancement, I could use higher quality nutrition fluids and repair potions instead of experience points for strengthening and energy? Finally, using efficient wish spells to replace fate coins' function, perhaps in the future, I could mass-produce elite professionals with bloodline abilities. Of course, this was just a burst of inspiration for Matthew. To achieve it would likely take a long time. It might even be impossible to accomplish. But Matthew was confident and determined to walk that path, step by step. After all, he could use his special abilities to solve one correct answer after another. With both the result and the path ahead, Matthew was willing to invest in it. In the face of a hopeless future, Matthew knew that personal strength was limited, and most ordinary people's strength was limited as well. What Matthew aimed to do was turn many ordinary people into Beelzebubs. If every human became extraordinary, everyone a legendary figure. Even the lofty gods would have no choice but to lower their arrogant heads and listen carefully to humanity's voice. At that moment, Matthew felt his thoughts clear, finally finding a glimmer of hope in the eternal darkness. Completely unaware of the immense significance he represented, Beelzebub groggily opened his eyes, instinctively shouting in pain, "Come on, you disgusting monster." The large man sat up, locking eyes with Matthew's intense gaze. The anger surging within him quickly vanished, replaced by inexplicable fear. Beelzebub recognized that gaze from this mysterious and powerful arcanist. It was the same look he used to dissect prey and explain it in detail to the younglings of his tribe. Chapter 143, A New Home. Chapter 143, A New Home. Beelzebub was ecstatic, fondling his new weapon, another slaughter. Although it was also a replica, its high level of craftsmanship still placed it in the high-tier category. It was another weapon left behind by blood-handed Khan. What fascinated Matthew the most was how the now taller Beelzebub effortlessly wielded one slaughter in each hand, swinging them with remarkable skill. Matthew patiently inspected Beelzebub's attributes. Name: Beelzebub multi-class, level 11 warrior talent, Frost Giant bloodline LV1, plus 10 to maximum health, plus 2 to constitution, plus 2 to strength. Feats: high-tier feat Mastery of large weapons. Mastery of large weapons allows for greater destructive force, plus 3 to damage, plus 2 to checks. High-tier feat Dual wielding two-handed weapons. Able to wield two-handed weapons in each hand, proficiently mastering dual wielding. Mid-tier feat Weapon control. Mid-tier feat Power burst. Mid-tier feat Mastery of defense. Low-tier feat Battle-hardened veteran. Low-tier feat Commanding operations. Inheritance: high-tier inheritance Endless rage. Draws rage from battle and killing enemies, significantly increasing damage and attack power, plus 10 to damage, immunity to mid-tier mind spells. Attribute: strength, 28 agility, 12 constitution, 20 intelligence, 10 perception, 12 charisma, 11 luck, plus 4 fortunate star. Evaluation: perhaps his greatest strength is his luck. Beelzebub awakened the Frost Giant bloodline. That's a rare and valuable trait. Could other barbarians also possess such potential? Even if not, with Beelzebub as a seed, there's no fear of not spreading and cultivating this. 2 new high-tier feats. If the mid-tier warriors of the territory could learn them, their strength would greatly increase again. Not bad, Beelzebub's got quite a lot of good things. This deal is well worth it. Stroking his chin, countless thoughts flashed through Matthew's mind. A small smile crept onto his face as he looked at Beelzebub with newfound ideas. Beelzebub, who had progressed in all attributes, sensed the deep, penetrating gaze of the arcanist and felt a chill down his spine. Despite feeling unnerved, he forced himself to ignore it. He wasn't stupid, he knew the changes in him were thanks to the Arcanist's intervention. As long as it improves my strength, I wouldn't mind being used as a test subject by the Arcanist. Clearly, the grim tale of the trolls had already spread throughout Bay territory. However, since the test subjects were the hated trolls, everyone found it gratifying. Ignoring Beelzebub's wild speculations, Matthew smacked his lips thoughtfully once everyone's luck had returned to normal. It seems like they don't plan to continue making moves. Using blood-handed Khan and these experiment subjects was rather interesting. That's fine, the territory can continue its low-profile development, but now that they've made their move. Next time we recruit people, we should advertise it well. After everyone had busied themselves throughout the morning and just finished breakfast, they were startled by the commotion outside. Thud, thud, thud. The synchronized sound of marching immediately caught everyone's attention. They saw a troop of several hundred soldiers marching in formation. Their movements were perfectly in sync, even across uneven mud, maintaining impeccable order. Their imposing presence surpassed any army the onlookers had seen. Whoa, are these Bay Territory soldiers? Haha, that's right. Pretty impressive, huh? How did they manage that? It's not just for show, is it? For show. If the thousands of trolls they killed and defeated heard that, they'd crawl out of their graves in rage. Thousands of trolls. Are those the ones we're supposed to catch? Yep, the ones with a bounty of 50 gold each. The adventurers were abuzz with conversation, their tones filled with shock and curiosity. They couldn't believe that such an imposing army could be found in the remote eastern province of the Netheril Empire. Naturally, the new adventurers, who had harbored some sneaky thoughts, were now behaving obediently. Though the powerful and mysterious Arcanist was intimidating, he likely wouldn't pay attention to small fry like them. But with Bay Territory soldiers being so formidable, they'd have no trouble keeping the adventurers in line. When it came to managing adventurers, Matthew had a wealth of experience. Behind the soldiers, a caravan of 200 wagons approached in perfect order. They carried a vast amount of supplies, including food, weapons, medicine, and clothing. The largest portion of the supplies was building materials. The civilians who arrived with the convoy demonstrated astonishing construction skills that shocked everyone. In just an hour, they had built a temporary warehouse to protect the supplies from the elements. All the goods delivered by the Thorn merchant caravan were safely stored inside. At that moment, everyone understood. Adam Smith's command to build the camp wasn't solely for defense against the upcoming enemies. But seeing how much Bay Territory was willing to invest in building a temporary camp with so many resources and manpower, everyone was now utterly convinced of Bay Territory's wealth. The newly named Murloc camp saw Matthew leave behind 200 soldiers to defend it and 1,000 construction workers. This place wasn't just going to be a camp, it would become a fortress for Bay Territory, standing tall in the misty marsh. The rest of the group set off toward Bay Territory. Compared to just a day earlier, everyone now had greater hope and excitement for the future in Bay Territory. The territory's military strength guaranteed their lives would at least be secure. While everyone imagined Bay Territory to be a massive fortress filled with military camps and soldiers in training, they passed through a dense reed field and were greeted by vast, cultivated farmlands. Neat square rice paddies irrigated by the Silvermoon River sparkled under the dazzling sunlight, reflecting a stunning gleam. Strong oxen worked the fields, turning the soil over. A reclamation team of over 4,000 people was hard at work surrounding the fields. Ambitiously, they aimed to cultivate even more land to claim as their own. Looking beyond the flat, picturesque fields, a grand city stood peacefully on the banks of the Silvermoon River. Gazing at the towering grey city walls, everyone was overwhelmed with excitement. Here they had found their new home. Announcement: a big thank you to Melbourne Estelor and Mark Araga for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 144. The Turbulent May. Chapter 144. The Turbulent May. Time flew by like an arrow. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Year 129, May 1st. Bay Territory, early morning. Beautiful rays of dawn spread across the vast farmlands, illuminating the wide fields. More and more pioneers were starting their work. Columns of smoke from burning fires slowly rose into the sky. The previously calm and serene Silvermoon River, like a refined noblewoman, rippled slightly, revealing a few pairs of round, curious eyes. The orderly marching and loud slogans from the wide fields scared the Murlocs away from the riverbanks. On the expanding city walls, masons carefully carved intricate patterns into the square stone bricks. Once completed, the 10-meter-high walls would become one of the most critical preparations for next year's orc invasion. The workforce of over 5,000 people was the largest labor group besides the pioneers. In the city's downstream area, large factories were being built along the river. These factories continuously produced various goods, which were then transported to the warehouses of Bay City. At the current stage, most of the goods produced was supplied to the rapidly growing population of Bay Territory. After all, if people had money but nothing to buy, it would seriously dampen their enthusiasm for productivity. Affordable and practical daily necessities gained widespread approval from the majority of the citizens. Matthew did not expect to make money this way. Instead, he ordered the factories to further improve their products based on user feedback. The development of Bay Territory's factories still had a long road ahead. Bay Territory Lord's Mansion. Matthew's biological clock woke him up on time. After washing up with practiced ease, he used Mage Hand to don his silk attire, feeling its softness and smoothness. Matthew quietly reflected, indeed, such beautiful things will always be loved by all the worlds. Stroking the emblem of the Sir family's white mage tower, Matthew stowed away various magical items before grabbing his staff and heading outside. As soon as he stepped out of the bedroom, a rich, sweet aroma greeted him. In addition to meat, milk, and fruit, Matthew's meals had some new additions. Steamed magic taro, fragrant and delicious, soft yet chewy, simply prepared like jelly with a unique flavor. Firebird fruit, a rare delicacy from the shadowy forest, resembled a small tomato and had a mildly sweet taste, though it was not abundant. Stir-fried groundhog meat, a mid-tier magical creature, which after prolonged consumption could slightly enhance constitution, was crispy and flavorful, though unfortunately small in size. Matthew recorded the effects of these foods before contentedly enjoying his breakfast. During his post-meal walk, he assigned Lena and the other apprentice mages their study tasks for the week. When he returned to his study, Steward Ralph was already there, ready to report on last month's territorial developments. Population 15,382 people. With the Murloc camp as a midpoint, the Thorn merchant caravan has saved nearly half its transportation time. The weekly population growth rate has reached 3,000 people. Land reclaimed. 20,000 acres. Currently 7,000 people are working on reclamation. Speed. 10 people can reclaim 1 acre per day. With the constant influx of new settlers, it's estimated that an additional 30,000 acres can be reclaimed this month. Gold Fang and Silver Fang cleared the kobold camps around the shadowy forest, capturing over 5,000 kobolds. Total kobold population, 8,000. Additionally, they acquired over 7,000 kobold eggs. It's estimated that the kobold population will increase by 500 weekly. Troll prisoners, 1,200. Contributing in 4 shifts and providing 6,000 gold coins in daily revenue. Through the development of the shadowy forest and Troll Valley, Lyon's reclamation teams and adventurers capture 100 trolls per week. The scale of the farm continues to expand, with the workforce now reaching 1,000 people. Poultry count, 50,000 chickens, 20,000 ducks. 5,000 geese. Egg production has begun. Livestock count, 10,000 pigs, 5,000 cows, 1,000 warhorses. By the end of the month, all livestock and poultry numbers are expected to increase by 50%. Production factories. Arms factory, 500 workers. Steelworks, 500 workers. Cotton and hemp factory, 500 workers. Clothing factory, 500 workers. Lumberyard, 500 workers. Timber mill, 400 workers. Slaughterhouse, 400 workers. Food processing plant, 400 workers. Herbal plant, 400 workers. In total, 30 factories employ 4,000 people. The warehouse stores enough food to feed 100,000 people for 3 years. Current production of daily necessities is generating 30,000 gold coins in sales. Construction team, 1,000 workers undergoing advanced training. This month they will build a bridge spanning the Silvermoon River to the eastern coast. Adventurer count, 1,200 with an increase of 300 adventurers each week. Military forces, 800 reservists, 400 regular soldiers, 2 high-tier professionals, and 30 mid-tier professionals. Total revenue for last month, 160,000 gold coins. Blood circulation potions brought in 130,000. Adventurer spending contributed 20,000 gold coins, and civilian spending contributed 10,000 gold coins. Total expenditure for last month, 158,000 gold coins. Troll bounties, 50,000. Combat rewards, 20,000 gold coins. Material purchases, 40,000 gold coins. Magic scrolls and materials, 30,000 gold coins. Civilian wages, 15,000 gold coins. Magic materials and botanical discovery bonuses, 3,000 gold coins. Ralph the steward was elated by the astounding income and expenditure figures. He knew that the territory's steadily increasing wealth and resources would fuel its overall growth. After the report, Ralph eagerly asked Matthew, "What will be our main development strategy this month?" Flipping through more detailed information, Matthew was about to outline the month's focus when a thought suddenly crossed his mind. Remembering something crucial, he solemnly told Ralph, "Send people to patrol Silvermoon River and Misty Marsh, and pay close attention to those murlocs." Ralph had rarely seen the Lord so serious, so he immediately nodded, left the study, and headed straight for the barracks. Watching Ralph's retreating figure, Matthew carefully recalled the images in his mind. It was a month notoriously unfriendly to players. Most players had just completed their novice training, chosen their classes, and learned their basic skills. They were all eager to head out on exciting adventures and see the world. And then they ran headlong into the murloc upheaval. For reasons unknown, nearly all the murlocs abandoned their habitats and surged onto the land in great numbers. The unprepared players were harshly schooled by these creatures they once looked down on. Over 90% of the players lost a precious resurrection in that turmoil, many losing their first life in frustration. Because of this, May was dubbed Turbulent May by the players, commemorating their unlucky experiences. However, the murloc unrest came and went quickly, not significantly affecting the world's balance, which was why Matthew didn't remember it immediately. But now he couldn't afford to be careless. Bay territory was right next to the Silvermoon River and the eastern coast. Chapter 145, The Birth of a Baylander. Chapter 145, The Birth of a Baylander. Splash. The water, mixed with white foam, rushed down as hands grabbed linen clothes, sprinkled soap powder, and rubbed them vigorously. Shaking off all the foam, Elle wrung out the water with force and placed the clothes into a wooden tub, letting out a long sigh. She forced a smile and nodded to the busy women around her before turning towards the wooden cabin area. "Let's go, school's out. Wait for me, I still don't understand one of the questions." "Huh. The teacher just explained it. Hee, teach me then." "Fine, let's go to my house. My mom bought dried cod today." "Really? I love dried cod. Ah. Can't say no to you." Two children ran past her with smiles of happiness on their faces. Seeing their innocent play, she couldn't help but let the corners of her mouth curve slightly upward. Then, as if reminded of something, she instinctively reined in her smile and walked into the house. As soon as she entered, the rich scent of meat filled her nose, and her mouth watered involuntarily. She swallowed and tried to distract herself from the thought of food, walking over to the window to hang up the washed clothes. "Little girl, come and eat. Hee, it seems my cooking isn't so bad after all. Lady Tana approved of me. Starting this month, the farm supervisor will pay me 1 silver coin. I've never earned so much before. I bought extra food today, so come and eat with me." She froze for a moment, meeting the wrinkled face of an old woman who was waving her over, no longer as stern as when she first arrived. She hesitated for a while, but under those penetrating eyes, she slowly walked over and sat down. The old woman didn't seem to notice the wariness in her eyes, and cheerfully ladled out a large bowl of meat soup, sighing, "Coming to Bay territory is like truly living for the first time. What kind of life was I living before?" The old woman took a happy sip, her wrinkles smoothing out. Her cloudy eyes filled with endless satisfaction, and with her few remaining yellow teeth, she chewed carefully, savoring the taste, letting out a long breath before speaking earnestly. "I've lived over 80 years now, so I've lived enough. Hess, I was lucky enough to come to Bay territory. Before I die, I can enjoy a few more years of peace. Look at this black bread, so solid. No wood chips, no ash. I haven't tasted this in over 20 years. You're still young. You've got many good years ahead of you. Oh, and this dried cod, so delicious, and only 50 copper coins per fish. Today is the day to buy it. The Lord even worries we might not be eating well, such an interesting man." The old woman dipped her black bread into the soup, wrapping it around the dried fish, eating one mouthful after another. Catching sight of her picking up the black bread, the old woman chuckled slyly and pushed over a jar of pickled radish strips. "Try this. Not sure if it's to your taste." She nodded silently and clumsily picked up a few strips with chopsticks, stuffing them into the bread and eating it in big bites. The seemingly plain radish strips were far more flavorful than she had expected, tangy, sweet, and crunchy. "If you ask me, there's no better place than here, to find a lord who cares for his people. We've got at least a few good decades left here. Your people should feel the same. Steward Ralph has already agreed. You can report to the lord at noon." Her hands froze in mid-motion, staring in disbelief at the old woman. She had never imagined that this seemingly dull, even senile old woman she had once secretly mocked, actually knew everything. Her first instinct was to silence her, kill her, and run. But as she met the old woman's calm, knowing eyes and recalled the formidable strength and swift methods of the territory's soldiers, She suppressed the urge. If she acted, she would surely die. She couldn't die, not yet. Yet after waiting a long time, there was no capture, only the old woman's crafty smile. The old woman finished her last bite of bread, calmly wiped her mouth and said, "There's no need to be on guard. The Lord knows everything. He told me about you, and if you're smart enough, you'll understand why the Lord does what he does. Getting old. I can't even eat all the good things anymore." With that, the old woman took her bowl and slowly walked into the kitchen to wash it. It took her a while to move again. She finished all her food, cleaned the table, washed her dishes, and quietly returned to her room. Sitting at her dressing table, she gazed at her reflection, a face no longer as thin and gaunt as it once was. The old woman's words echoed in her mind. Silently, she opened the drawer of the dressing table and took out a broken piece of armor. She gently stroked its jagged edges, her emerald green eyes filled with hesitation. What path should she take for the future? Just then urgent cries came from outside, familiar voices. "Careful, lots of murlocs are crossing the river. The patrol has sounded the alarm. Everyone is to stay inside. Those who pass the reserve soldiers' exam gather at the walls. I need to warn the others, sound the alarm throughout the city. I'm heading to the Lord's Manor to report." It was Jiffin. And Tom. She recognized Jiffin's voice. She had passed the reserve soldiers' test and had been assigned under Jiffin's command. Now was an emergency. If she truly wanted to escape, she would have a better chance than usual. But as a deep, resonant horn echoed from the direction of the city gates, she suddenly realized that, without even knowing when, she had already donned the reserve soldier's uniform given by the Lord, along with her armor and weapons. When she stepped out the door and saw the figures rushing to the walls, the confusion and hesitation in her mind vanished, and she followed without hesitation. As she passed her neighbor's house, she saw two nervous yet envious faces excitedly waving at her. "Good luck, Sister Elio." "Stay safe, that's right, Sister Elio. When you get back, I'll treat you to some grilled fish." A strange feeling surged in her heart, and the icy facade she had been wearing melted away. She smiled brightly at them, replying cheerfully, "All right. Stay safe inside and wait for me to tell you some stories when I get back." Amid their excited clapping and cheers, Elio sprinted towards the walls, greeted with warm smiles from familiar comrades along the way. The old woman stood at the door, watching her leave, her face breaking into a deep smile. "You've already begun to see yourself as one of Bay Territory's own. Announcement, a big thank you to Jan for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me." Chapter 146. The Stirring Murlocs. Chapter 146. The Stirring Murlocs. Blub blub blub. The endless shouting gathered into a cacophony of noise, causing the soldiers on the walls to frown. As far as the eye could see, countless murlocs were gathering along the riverbank. They crowded together in layers, bickering and fighting, creating an irritating commotion. In the distance, the pioneers gathered together, preparing to retreat from the farmland. Just then, as if receiving a command, the murlocs packed along the riverbank began to charge towards the gathering humans. Seeing this, Jiffin's pupils contracted, and he raised his voice to call out to old John on the other side. "Boss, those murlocs are moving, they're about to attack us." Tossing aside the used communication scroll, old John drew his longsword and with a stern gaze sweeping over everyone spoke firmly. "Defend the territory, defend our home. Defend the territory, defend our home." The soldiers' unified shout echoed along the walls, carrying into the town. Inside, they heard the responding cries of support, bringing a smile to every soldier's face. An indescribable feeling surged through Elio, sending chills up her spine. Her shouts, though, were filled with absolute sincerity. Before she knew it, she had found an excuse for herself. Her people deserved a better life. The city gates gradually closed, leaving just enough of a gap for soldiers to pass through. Led by old John, the soldiers marched out in formation. Captain Sean, busy gathering the pioneers, called his patrol soldiers to form a defensive line, preparing to repel the incoming murlocs. At the same time, he instructed the pioneers to take a detour and enter the city from the other side. The throng of murlocs surged forward like a tidal wave. In the sunlight, Elio got her first good look at these enemies. The first thing that caught her eye was a massive mouth full of fangs, with sparse, sharp teeth still holding remnants of algae and other food scraps. Their emerald green scales covered their bodies, interspersed with mottled patches of varying shades. Unlike the long, slender limbs of kobolds, the murlocs had short, stocky limbs with webbed fingers. The weapons in their hands were in poor condition and extremely varied. Rusty, broken swords weren't unusual. Elongated stones and bones were also common. Elio even saw a murloc wielding a fossilized fish as a weapon. Most of the murlocs wore no armor, relying only on their weak scales as their only form of protection. Individually, murlocs were incredibly weak in battle. Even kobolds or goblins of the same level could easily defeat them. But when the number of murlocs swelled to an uncountable mass, it filled most people with fear. Their awkward steps carried them towards the patrol soldiers' defensive line, emboldened by their sheer numbers, shouting incessantly. Captain Sean drew his longsword, pushing aside his inner turmoil as he watched the swarm of murlocs rush towards them. He shouted in a low voice, spears up. Forward, the 100 patrol soldiers, fearless, obeyed the command, leveling their spears and advancing. Half of the patrol soldiers were regulars and already professional warriors. Dealing with murlocs with nearly 0 challenge rating, they easily overwhelmed them. The advancing line of steel spears instantly killed more than 50 murlocs upon contact. Many sharp spearheads pierced through the bodies of one murloc and into the next. Captain Sean, experienced in dealing with murlocs, did not order a further advance, instead shouting loudly, "Soldiers on the flanks, fall back. Form a defensive ring." The soldiers, thoroughly trained, had no desire to play the hero and quickly followed orders, forming a tight circle. 2 lines of soldiers, one inside and one out, stood 2 paces apart, the perfect distance to maximize the force of their thrusts. Despite the seemingly endless murloc swarm, the soldiers remained calm. Under Captain Sean's orders, the 2 lines alternated between thrusting, retreating, gathering strength, and thrusting again. Thrust, crack. The formation, resembling a steel porcupine, instantly inflicted heavy casualties on the murlocs that surrounded them. The dense crowd of murlocs was pierced and killed, yet more still howled and surged forward. Captain Sean frowned, sensing that something was off about these murlocs. Typically, after losing dozens of their kind, these cowardly creatures would scatter in panic. But now, they were pressing the attack despite the threat of death. Something was wrong. With growing concern, Captain Sean didn't hesitate to order the soldiers to kill and hold off the murlocs, while slowly shifting the formation closer to the city. The murlocs were endless, but the soldiers' safety was paramount. However, some of the murlocs also seemed to catch onto his plan. With a sharp screech, a dark red aura spread out from the murlocs. All the murlocs touched by the aura turned bloodshot, their bodies swelling in size. Their sharp screeches deepened into guttural growls, and their attacks became even more frenzied. They no longer cared about dying or the spears in their path, howling as they charged. Some even trampled over their own kind, in an attempt to leap over the spear wall. The pressure on the soldiers suddenly increased. The thrusts of their spears were no longer sufficient to hold back the swarm. Once a murloc breached the line, someone had to deal with it directly. Slashing down 2 murlocs, Captain Sean decisively ordered, "Tighten formation. One squad draw swords and deal with the ones that break through." With Captain Sean's quick thinking, the soldiers managed to stabilize their footing once more. But with the formation packed tightly, their movements slowed significantly. Glancing at the increasing number of murlocs pressing in, Captain Sean couldn't help but feel regret. "We'll definitely have to bring shields on patrol from now on, no matter how tiring." The murlocs crowded closer and closer, and the patrol soldiers' formation inched forward slower and slower. If the soldiers exhausted their strength, they could easily be overwhelmed and dragged down by the murlocs. Most players had met a bitter end this way. Just then a sharp whistle rang out, drawing everyone's attention. A lithe figure dashed from the supporting soldier ranks at high speed. She held 2 curved blades, and the moment she collided with the murloc swarm, began to spin her entire body. The twin gleaming blades effortlessly sliced through the murlocs' fragile bodies, creating a thick mist of blood. The swirling blood was whipped into a terrifying crimson tornado by the spinning figure. Every murloc that came into contact with the crimson tornado was shredded to pieces, and the once dense murloc horde was torn apart, leaving a bloody path. Terrifying. Ferocious. Old John instinctively widened his eyes, but quickly seized the opportunity and led his team in a charge. Chapter 147, The Half-Demon. Chapter 147, The Half-Demon. The raging crimson whirlwind slaughtered over hundreds of murlocs along the way, leaving a trail of mangled limbs and torn flesh. Elio's entire body was drenched in blood. From the stench of the blood, she inexplicably sensed a strange sweetness and satisfaction. Yet this feeling filled her with disgust. She had seen many of her kin lose themselves to the desire for slaughter, destroying their enemies and themselves in the process. However, as the number of murlocs she killed grew, the hidden symptoms within her body began to emerge. Small curved horns appeared on her forehead, and blood-red tattoos surfaced on her skin, making her appearance increasingly sinister. Elio, suddenly aware of what was happening, closed her eyes in silence. She could already guess that her body was transforming into something she had once despised. Others would soon look at her with fear and revulsion, and what awaited her would be exile or even a manhunt. But Elio no longer cared. Since she had chosen to fight, she wouldn't stop halfway. She adjusted her course, slicing her way toward the patrol soldier's position. A true bloodbath greeted her as she bypassed the soldier's formation and dove headfirst into the Murloc horde, drawing attention away from the others. The soldiers, who had been struggling to hold the line, suddenly found their strength renewed and pushed the Murlocs back. Under Captain Sean's command, they followed the bloodied path Leo had cut and swiftly retreated to join the supporting soldiers. With more soldiers gathered, the pressure on defense lightened significantly. They were able to rotate positions, rest, and regain strength, soon carving their way out of the Murloc swarm. Of course, none of this would have been possible without Elio's help. Many soldiers stepped over the path of blood and flesh she had created with complex feelings as they retreated to the city walls. Once gathered on the walls, the soldiers noticed their predicament and immediately fired arrows and bolts to cover their retreat. The soldiers withdrew in an orderly fashion toward the city gates. Elio, soaked in Murloc blood, was the last to return. The gates slammed shut. The clangs and bangs of battle continued outside, but no longer affected those inside. Captain Sean exhaled deeply, then walked toward the bloodied figure with a sense of excitement. But as he approached, his steps involuntarily faltered. He saw that the thick blood covering Elio was slowly receding, as if being absorbed into her body. Her dark horns starkly contrasted with her pale skin, creating an unsettling and evil aura. When his gaze met Elio's light brown eyes, Sean's vision momentarily blurred before he snapped back to his senses, filled with panic. Instinctively, Captain Sean took a step back. The movement did not go unnoticed by Elio, who sighed silently, gripping her blades tightly. Just then, a familiar, boisterous voice rang in her ears. "Ha ha. Well done. You're truly one of my soldiers." Old John clapped Elio on the shoulder, completely unfazed by her strange appearance, and pointed up toward the city walls, saying, "Listen up, everyone. The battle isn't over yet. The Lord has arrived." As he spoke, Old John's towering figure shielded Elio from many curious and wary stares, while he cheerfully said to her, "Your strength should have reached the middle tier by now, right? That's great news. If you sign the residency contract and the soldier's agreement, you'll be entitled to a hefty sum of gold coins." Elio, still a bit stunned, followed Old John as he rambled on about the benefits of becoming an official soldier. A flicker of shame passed through Captain Sean's eyes. He wanted to say something but didn't know where to start, and instead, he just watched them leave in silence. As they walked through the camp, many soldiers noticed Elio's changed appearance. Most of them were simply curious. None reacted with the fear or disgust that Elio had expected. In fact, some soldiers' conversations left her bewildered. "Hey, is that the reservist who had been hiding her strength all this time? Yup, she just took out hundreds of Murlocs in one go. That's hundreds of contribution points right there. Damn, if I'd known, I would have kept my strength hidden too, so I could rack up more kills during the battle. Please, with your strength. Didn't you get trashed by a troll yesterday? Ahem, that was just a moment of carelessness. I didn't dodge in time. Haha, I think she might be the Lord's secret weapon, like that mysterious Arcanist. She's got horns now, maybe the Lord's new experimental project. I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe we'll get them too someday. More power and more pay every month. You don't think that looks badass? Actually, it kinda does." The strange remarks eased Elio's tension somewhat, but as she neared the mysterious Lord, her doubts and fears still lingered. While Elio was lost in thought, standing on the walls, Matthew had already noticed her arrival. Name, Elio Fallenwing. Race, half-demon. Class, level 7 swordsman. Talents, advanced talent Bloodthirst LV1. After bathing in blood, +1 to all stats, +10 to damage, -5 to defense, -5 to willpower. Advanced talent Ice Heart LV1. The greater the danger, the calmer you become. +4 to willpower. Proficiencies, advanced proficiency sword mastery LV2. Skilled in the use of sword-type weapons, +10 to damage, +4 to accuracy. Advanced proficiency blood hunger LV1. Killing an enemy restores 1 point of health. Note, requires the Bloodthirst talent to learn. Intermediate proficiency weak point perception. Intermediate proficiency power attack. Intermediate proficiency mighty blow. Basic proficiency parry. Basic proficiency veteran. Inheritance, advanced inheritance sword heart LV1. Harness inner kai to release sword energy that deals +10 damage and +5 armor penetration. Stats strength 14 agility, 18 constitution, 14. Intelligence 11 perception, 14 charisma, 14 luck, -3. Evaluation, a demon bound by kin. Well, a half-demon already, huh? Makes sense, though. This isn't a game where a whole race suddenly appears in an update. A swordsman, huh? No wonder her combat ability is so strong. But if this class exists in the Western continent, could some Eastern classes be? Dual advanced talents. Looks like my luck's been improving after all. A whirlwind of thoughts passed through Matthew's mind. As Leo drew closer, her icy expression catching his attention, Matthew took the initiative and walked over. Under her surprised gaze, he smiled and said, "Well done, soldier. You saved many of your comrades. You'll be awarded 500 gold coins and 200 contribution points. Additionally, I'll have a sharp enchanted longsword crafted for you. Yes, you're my sword now." Chapter 148. The Murloc Tidewalker. Chapter 148. The Murloc Tidewalker. Matthew's words left Leo somewhat bewildered. She unconsciously raised her arm, where the crimson tattoos glowed faintly. "Doesn't the Lord mind at all? 500 gold coins and 200 contribution points. That's a huge sum, enough to buy plenty of things. A longsword. How did the Lord know I'm more skilled with a sword?" Staring into Matthew's familiar dark eyes, Leo opened her mouth, and at old John's urging, she bowed slightly. "Thank you for the Lord's reward." With this body being a mere projection, Matthew had no reservations. He boldly reached out and patted Leo's shoulder, admiring her tall and slender frame as he praised. "Your personal strength is outstanding. But you need to work on coordinating with your teammates and improving your command skills. If you can make up for those weaknesses and keep earning contribution points, you could become a captain." As Leo stood there in a daze, Matthew signaled to Ralph, who then shouted loudly, "The highest contributor in this battle is Leo." Old John and Jai Fan quickly followed suit, shouting. Leo, the other soldiers joined in, ignoring Leo's strange appeal. Rants and shouted with envy and anticipation. Leo, after all, everyone wanted a strong teammate. The more loot to go around, the better. Having made a small gesture of goodwill, Matthew turned his attention to the Murlocs spreading across the Silvermoon River. Thousands filled the city, tens of thousands covered the fields. Even though the Murlocs were small in stature, when their numbers reached such overwhelming levels, covering the landscape as far as the eye could see, fear naturally arose. With a quick glance, Matthew estimated that there were no less than 50,000 Murlocs, with more still emerging from the river. The vast fields that had been cleared for planting were now trampled into a murky mess by the Murlocs. Luckily, there were still a few days before sowing would begin. Otherwise, this would have resulted in enormous waste and loss of precious time. Even so, watching their beloved land being so defiled made every soldier of Bay territory seethe with anger. After all, the land that was being ruined included the very plots they were about to be assigned. The small Murlocs posed no threat to the sturdy walls, but every soldier wanted to rush out and fight. Matthew wasn't troubled by the large number of Murlocs. Instead, he silently pondered, why are these normally chaotic, energetic Murlocs gathering in such large numbers? Killing these Murlocs only grants me 1 or 2 experience points each. How can I maximize their value? Glancing over the mass of Murlocs, an idea struck Matthew and he silently thought, "Yeah, time to make an appearance." Yes. On it, with a cheerful response echoing in Matthew's mind, a flash of silvery light streaked across the sky above the walls, accompanied by a clear and resonant dragon's roar that echoed powerfully. Majestic, mighty. Even the soldiers who had grown familiar with Yaya found themselves feeling uneasy, but were nonetheless filled with excitement. Having just come back to her senses, Leo gazed at the beautiful Yaya, feeling the oppressive aura emanating from the dragon, and a strange sensation welled up inside her. Is this the Lord's confidence, or does he truly not care about any race? As Leo pondered, the Murlocs below, overwhelmed by the dragon's presence, collapsed in fear. Even the loud, chaotic noises immediately quieted. Yaya had never had the chance to show off in front of so many creatures before and happily flapped her wings, flying toward the Murlocs that hadn't yet succumbed to her presence. Like a giant eraser, Yaya swept across the Murloc blackboard with astonishing speed. Wherever she passed, all the Murlocs fell flat to the ground in terror. Seeing how feeble the Murlocs were, everyone couldn't help but smile. Just then, several bright white ice spears shot out from the Silvermoon River, aimed directly at the airborne Yaya. Prepared for this, Yaya skillfully twisted her wings, gracefully dodging the spears, her bright blue eyes locking onto the figure beneath the water. Watching Yaya remain unharmed, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Matthew also received information about the enemy, as he observed the ice spears leaving a trail of bright white crystals behind, murmuring to himself, casting ability. There's a Murloc shaman among them, which means it's very likely that the one controlling these Murlocs is a Tidewalker. Although much of his gaming knowledge couldn't be applied directly to this world, that didn't mean it was entirely useless. His familiarity with various monsters allowed Matthew to quickly deduce the identity of the enemy. The creature controlling this vast horde of Murlocs was most likely a high-tier Murloc Tidewalker. Defeating a high-tier Murloc wasn't difficult. The rapidly developing Bay territory already had sufficient military power. However, locating and eliminating a high-tier Murloc within the vast Silvermoon River, surrounded by tens of thousands of Murlocs, would be a huge challenge. and judging by this tidewalker's cautious behavior, it wouldn't be easy to find. Looking at the countless murlocs below, a faint smile appeared on Matthew's face. Conventional methods would be ineffective here. How to deal with vast numbers of aquatic murlocs had always been a major headache for the northern nations. For thousands of years, no effective solution had been found. The only option was to spend significant resources each year on murloc hunts. Alternatively, long-term bounties were posted, encouraging low-level adventurers to help clear them out. However, for the players who sought efficiency and results, figuring out how to eliminate large numbers of aquatic murlocs became a matter of pride and profit. After all, even small bounties on murlocs could accumulate into gold coins. Through years of player ingenuity and experimentation, several effective, simple, and cheap murloc killing methods had been discovered. Eventually, entire murloc killing squads formed, making a living by clearing out murlocs for lords, and it was said they earned quite a bit. Naturally, Matthew was familiar with these methods, and one in particular was perfectly suited for Bay Territory's current situation. Having made up his mind, Matthew gave Ralph a look and spoke decisively. These murlocs have come at just the right time. Their strength is weak, and they pose little threat. Let's use this opportunity to train the newly recruited soldiers. Such a good target had come knocking. What a waste it would be not to drill the troops. Chapter 149. Practical Combat Training. Chapter 149. Practical Combat Training. Upon hearing Matthew's orders, Old John didn't act immediately. Instead, he sought out the training master, Arnold. After the two discussed the situation for a while, they concluded that the Lord's idea had significant potential and practical value. However, before taking action, Old John gathered all 1,000 soldiers at one city gate. Even if something unexpected happened, like the murlocs rushing in, they could easily hold their ground. Then, Old John dispatched a squad of heavily armored soldiers, who charged through the gate's narrow opening. These heavily armored soldiers, mostly made up of barbarians, possessed strength and defense far beyond what the murlocs could handle. With shields raised, they pushed forward, while their blades effortlessly cut down wave after wave of murlocs. The murlocs charged forward, shrieking, but their pitiful combat power didn't match their bravery. Their shabby weapons couldn't penetrate the defenses of the heavily armored soldiers. At most, they only splattered the soldiers with blood. After confirming the murlocs' weak combat capabilities, Old John finally relaxed and sent out a second unit composed of veterans and new recruits. The large number of murlocs initially imposed psychological pressure on the soldiers. But this pressure was far from life-threatening. After a brief adjustment, the veterans became confident, and the new recruits overcame their nervousness, gaining valuable experience in real combat. Seeing that the training was effective, Old John and Arnold were reassured. However, they didn't rush to send more soldiers out. Instead, they carefully monitored the time. Each training team was only allowed to fight for half an hour before being rotated out, and they ensured that the veterans outnumbered the new recruits. As a result, even though the fighting was intense and some soldiers were injured, not a single soldier died. After roughly 3 hours, every soldier had undergone a rotation, and a new round of training began. From initial tension to eventual desensitization, most of the recruits quickly developed a steel-hearted attitude. On the other hand, the piles of murloc corpses outside the walls steadily grew, forming a small hill. For safety reasons, Old John and Arnold changed the battlefield location, moving to another gate to continue the training. Starting with simple formations, the soldiers' military skills quickly improved as they progressed to more complex maneuvers. The effectiveness of the training attracted many onlookers. Seeing the soldiers fighting so valiantly, slaying so many murlocs without suffering significant injuries, the previously anxious citizens relaxed. Ralph, seizing the opportunity, promptly announced, "Everyone can take a half-day off, wages will still be paid, and all goods are 20% off." With the assurance that the murlocs posed no major threat, people immediately took advantage of the opportunity to explore and see how Bay City had grown and changed. As the constant kill notifications rang in Matthew's ears, he chose to mute them temporarily, leaving only a summary report while he focused on his task. Before him sat a common adventurer's paralysis potion. But don't misunderstand, he wasn't planning to use it against the murlocs. A potion costing nearly 20 gold coins per bottle could only paralyze a few dozen murlocs. Using it to deal with the tens of thousands of murlocs would cost tens of thousands of gold coins, an astronomical expense. Besides, it would be pointless. The murloc tidewalker, a high-tier enemy, had significant influence over the murloc horde. Even if all the low-tier murlocs were killed, the tidewalker could simply retreat upstream or downstream of the Silvermoon River and return with even more murlocs. After a few cycles of this, Matthew would be bankrupt. This paralysis potion was reserved specifically for the murloc tidewalker. Alongside the paralysis potion were several interesting ingredients. Murloc scales, the heart's blood of Isawa murloc, high concentration nutrient liquid, phantom fruit, a low-tier magical plant. When eaten raw, it induces powerful hallucinations. It can be used to make hallucinogenic potions and costs 20 silver coins per fruit. Devil's vine petals, a mid-tier magical plant. They emit a strange fragrance that intensifies when mixed with blood. Consuming them leads to addiction, and they are used to make concealment potions and cost 5 gold coins per pound. These ingredients had limited uses on their own, but combined, they could produce remarkable effects. Matthew began by grinding the murloc scales into powder and mixing them thoroughly into the high-concentration nutrient liquid. He cut open the fragrant phantom fruit, dripped in the heart's blood of Isawa murloc, and let it sit for half an hour. Then he mixed it all into the paralysis potion and continued stirring. Finally, he filtered the mixture and added powdered devil's vine petals before mixing it vigorously once more. The process was simple, but when Matthew finished, he had failed. Could he really invent a new potion with just one try? Impossible. Unfazed, Matthew discarded the failed batch and began again. After 3 consecutive failures, Matthew memorized every step and decisively opened his status screen. Ding. Do you want to spend 1,000 experience points to perfect the new potion recipe? Without hesitation, Matthew confirmed. That afternoon, Matthew busied himself in the lab, preparing a special surprise for the murlocs. It wasn't until late at night that Matthew emerged from the lab, breathing in the cool night air under the blood-red moon. In his hand was a bottle of colorful liquid. Delicacy Potion, Murloc Edition, one of the many potions created by players. When consumed, it makes the drinker more delicious. That's right, it makes the user more tasty. Angela, who had been waiting outside the lab, looked on expectantly. Seeing Matthew nod, she let out a sigh of relief. Angela realized that, at some point, she had developed unwavering faith in her lord. The Lord can solve any problem. This time will be no different. Matthew, oblivious to Angela's thoughts, would have probably advised her with a serious tone. Blind personal worship is a dangerous thing. Now, though, Matthew wasn't in a rush. He enjoyed a leisurely dinner and patiently reviewed Liana's assignments. Afterward, he returned to his study. 2 minutes later, his phantom projection walked out, accompanying Angela back to the city walls. As they neared the wall, they were greeted by the clamor of thousands of murlocs and the shouts of soldiers. Matthew spotted a squad of blood-soaked soldiers returning from the gates. Each soldier's armor was stained with murloc blood and grime, and they looked quite battered. However, their spirits were high. Despite their fatigue, their eyes burned with determination. Angela quickly spoke. This is the 4th rotation. The battle just ended. Matthew glanced at the soldiers' accomplishments for the day. They had slain a total of 14,000 murlocs. On average, each soldier had killed over 10 murlocs, earning Matthew a total of 20,000 experience points. What a pity! To seize this development opportunity for Bay territory, these murlocs will have to be eliminated. Chapter 150. On the Importance of Intelligence. Chapter 150. On the Importance of Intelligence. Matthew didn't act rashly. He simply observed the murlocs below, who were feasting on the corpses of their companions. Just as Matthew remembered. The murlocs before him, easily controlled, weak in strength and vast in number. They had no qualms about devouring their own dead. Matthew even suspected that these periodic murloc uprisings were partly intended to reduce their own population. After all, leaving the safety of the water and charging onto land to attack far stronger opponents was suicidal. With no psychological burden, Matthew stood on the edge of the city wall. He uncorked the pink potion and poured it down onto the murlocs crowded around the corpses below. Seeing Matthew's action, Elio's eyes revealed a hint of curiosity. Is the Lord doing this to deal with the murlocs? What kind of potion is it? Can it really take out so many murlocs at once? After a full day of combat training, Elio had learned to cooperate with her soldier comrades. Her powerful individual strength earned her the trust of the soldiers, and as a squad leader, Jiffin was full of praise for her. Not only was Elio curious, but the other soldiers were also watching their lord with curiosity. At that moment, Angela, standing beside Matthew, keenly noticed something. The murlocs that consumed the corpses tainted with the delicacy potion began to collapse one by one. Additionally, they started to emit a faint stench, which Angela could smell even from several meters away. Is it some kind of poison? Before Angela could form a hypothesis, the surrounding murlocs, as if driven mad, rushed toward their fallen comrades. They opened their mouths wide and bit down without hesitation. These savage murlocs, devouring their own, didn't realize. As they consumed their companions' flesh, the stench began to emanate from their own bodies. With an average intelligence of less than 3, the Murlocs naturally didn't notice this oddity. They only felt that the food had become even more delicious and irresistible, causing their appetites to grow. However, the more they ate, the weaker they became. Eventually, they froze in place, gradually losing control of their bodies, collapsing limply. They didn't die, they remained fully conscious of their surroundings, but had no strength to move. They vaguely sensed their greedy Murloc companions swarming over. Pressing down, biting into their flesh, more and more Murlocs joined in. The soldiers on the wall witnessed everything clearly. The Murlocs below, now cannibalizing each other, seemed cursed by some horrifying spell. Greedily devouring their companions, they soon fell powerless, becoming food themselves. The affected Murlocs grew in number as the stench spread. At this point, all the soldiers understood. They watched in disbelief as the Murlocs tore each other apart, cannibalizing one another. The Murloc population was rapidly decreasing at an astonishing rate. None of them understood fully, but they all knew this had something to do with their lord. Seeing the lord's smiling face, the soldiers felt they had once again witnessed his mysterious and awe-inspiring power. They suppressed the urge to cheer and followed Angela's orders to rotate and rest. The Murlocs fell in droves, while more rushed in like mad, tearing into the flesh. The number of devoured Murlocs began to grow exponentially. 100, 500, 2000, 8000. Matthew calmly watched the chaos among the Murlocs below, with the data recording the situation in detail. Names: Yua. Race: Murloc. Class: Level 2 Warrior. Challenge rating: 1. Status: confused, paralyzed, infected with Devil's Vine pollen. The Murlocs infected by the delicacy potion fell into a paralyzed state, collapsing and losing consciousness. The infection from the Devil's Vine pollen caused their flesh to emit an irresistible fragrance to other Murlocs. Essentially, it was a targeted infection, using the faster-producing Devil's Vine pollen. The Murlocs had no resistance, driven by their lack of restraint. With willpower generally below 5, the Murlocs couldn't resist this fatal temptation. So one by one they fell prey, became infected, and turned into new sources of infection. This wasn't Matthew's first time seeing the delicacy potion in action, but none of the previous instances had been this spectacular. Unfortunately, this method only works on creatures as brainless as Murlocs. If it could be modified to work on dim-witted beasts like orcs, that would be great. After all, give them a bit of temptation. And they lose their minds. Self-slaughter is just basic behavior, much like certain people in the real world. As more and more Murlocs died or collapsed, Matthew didn't hesitate and loudly commanded. Special Task Force, assemble, prepare to leave the city with me. Angela drew her longsword, the hulking Beelzebub stepped forward, old John gripped his broadsword, and the one-armed H. All coated his dagger with poison with Jiffin's help. Except for Leon, who was guarding the Troll Valley, the most capable warriors in Bay territory had gathered. Elia was a bit stunned, but Jiffin, just finishing up, quickly nudged her. Follow me. Hurry, the gate opened once more, revealing a scene of carnage. The thick stench of blood was nauseating, yet none of those present flinched. Staring at the chaos among the distant Murlocs, Matthew pointed to the Silvermoon River and calmly said, "We must take out the Murloc leader before the rest return." After speaking, Matthew tore open a scroll. A concealed power quickly spread, enveloping every soldier around him. Fifth circle spell mass invisibility. Matthew moved unhesitatingly through the battlefield, littered with corpses, unnoticed by the remaining Murlocs. The others followed, feeling a chill as they passed the field of mutilated bodies. Matthew's guess was right. The delicacy potion hadn't affected the stronger, more determined Murlocs much. Indeed, the delicacy potion is the perfect tool for cleaning up Murloc minions. It's just that Murlocs are so unintelligent, otherwise it wouldn't be this effective. It's a shame, though if I could control them, they'd make great workers. With his mind full of ideas about potential tools, Matthew mused. Announcement: a big thank you to Lauritz Waj Alstad for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 151. Defeating the Murloc Tidecaller. Chapter 151. Defeating the Murloc Tidecaller. The Murloc chaos did not escape the eyes of the Murloc Tidecaller. This high-level Murloc, hidden in the Silvermoon River, anxiously watched the scene before it. It opened its mouth to shout loudly, but the distant Murlocs showed no signs of improvement. It could only command a large group of elite Murlocs nearby to charge into the fray, attempting to restore order and assert its authority through violence. Unfortunately, it failed. The habit of obedience could not overcome their instinctual love for flesh. Seeing that most of the Murlocs were infected, and with its own limited intelligence, the Murloc Tidecaller decided to make one last attempt. A dazzling red bloodlust aura spread out in all directions. However, this aura did not increase intelligence or willpower. As a result, the once powerful buff was completely useless in dispelling the Murloc's confusion, and instead revealed the Tidecaller's position. Waiting by the Silvermoon River, Matthew saw the Murloc Tidecaller immediately through Yaya's enhanced vision. He also obtained some of its information. Aside from being a level 13 Murloc Tidecaller, it was surrounded by 4 level 8-10 Murloc diviners. Alongside them were more than 20 Murloc warriors, each of whom possessed the strength of a mid-tier warrior. This was the core force controlling tens of thousands of Murlocs. If they were defeated, the naturally chaotic Murlocs would quickly fall apart. Murlocs shared a trait with kobolds and goblins. The more they gathered, the higher the chance of a stronger Murloc emerging. If this Murloc Tidecaller continued to survive, it could use the ongoing unrest to bring tens of thousands of Murlocs under its command. There was a high probability it could further advance its power level. It won't have that chance. Matthew's gaze was filled with calm killing intent. He recalled that the Murloc unrest usually lasted only about half a month, and with Bay Territory's reserves, they could easily endure it. But retreating into defense was never Matthew's way. As a newly established territory, the most important thing was to show determination and courage in expansion. Only then could a healthy, forward-looking culture be fostered, producing a people with the spirit of exploration. Anyone who dared to hinder Bay Territory's progress would be dealt with by Matthew without hesitation. More importantly, during this Murloc unrest, something significant was happening in the Misty Marshes. Matthew didn't want to miss it. This was something he had been planning for a long time. Following Matthew's order to attack, Yaya swooped down from the sky without a sound. She wasn't noticed by the Murlocs until she was right by the shallow banks of the Silvermoon River. Gurgle, wah, ooh, strange cries echoed all around. The Murloc Tidecaller sensed danger, but before it could react, a grey beam of light shot down. The Murloc Tidecaller screeched, grabbing a nearby Murloc diviner and throwing it into the path of the beam. The struck Murloc diviner vanished into the ether before it even knew what had happened. The beam, undeterred, hit another Murloc diviner, taking it into the space between time. The attacked Murloc Tidecaller's first instinct was to flee, turning to run as it sought protection from the Murloc warriors and dove toward the depths of the Silvermoon River. Boom! Yaya's body crashed into the water, sending shockwaves that threw the surrounding water into chaos. Before the water could settle, Yaya had already darted ahead, blocking the Murloc Tidecaller's escape, slashing at it with her claws. Wham! One of Yaya's claws tore into a strong Murloc warrior, ripping open a gaping wound in its chest. But the Murloc didn't even notice, continuing to screech and charge forward. Behind it, the Murloc Tidecaller had just lowered its ebony staff. The Murloc warriors around it became enraged, ignoring Yaya's dragon aura and charging with reckless abandon. Seeing the warriors willingly sacrificing themselves to occupy Yaya, the Murloc Tidecaller continued casting spells. It skillfully cast a series of escape spells on itself: Water Walk, Haste, Water Elemental Affinity, Strength Burst, and more. The Murloc Tidecaller had used these escape tactics to evade many deadly threats, managing to survive long enough to dominate this stretch of the river. If Yaya were the only attacker, the Tidecaller might have indeed escaped. A bright white light suddenly descended onto the river's surface, spreading freezing energy in all directions. Matthew had used his last high-level spell scroll, 7th tier spell Ice Prison. Crack! Solid pillars of frost immediately encased the Murloc Tidecaller and 2 nearby Murloc diviners. No matter how hard they struggled, attacked, or cast spells, the ice remained unshaken, unaffected by their efforts. With Matthew taking action, the rest of the Special Task Force launched their own swift attacks. Beelzebub, wielding dual axes, leveraged his extraordinary strength of 28 to unleash terrifying blows. He charged into the Murloc ranks with incredible speed, crashing through like a hammer. The weak and fragile Murlocs couldn't withstand his assault. They were either cleaved in two by his axes or crushed into pulp by his heavy armor. The elite Murlocs surrounding the Tidecaller bravely charged at Beelzebub, trying to stall him before their leader fell. When Beelzebub's charge began to slow, Elio, wielding twin blades, spun like a whirlwind, slicing through the Murlocs and unleashing another wave of carnage. This time, Matthew cast several enhancement spells on Elio and added a mana shield around her. With magical defenses bolstering her, Elio fearlessly pressed the attack, feeling a surge of excitement. Elio's death whirlwind lasted about 20 seconds before she began to tire. Beelzebub, recharged and roaring, took her place at the front, resuming his role as the vanguard. In just a minute, the remaining Murlocs were slaughtered under the alternating onslaught of Beelzebub and Elio. The group reached the Murloc Tidecaller as the ice prison shattered. Stripped of its escape options, the Murloc Tidecaller did not flee in desperation or terror, it assumed a combat stance instead. Interesting. Chapter 152, Naga. The Deep Sea. Chapter 152, Naga. The Deep Sea. Matthew admired the Murloc Tidecaller's bravery for a moment, then waved his hand decisively. Finish them. On the way over, Matthew had already cast the second-tier spells Water Walk and Water Breathing on everyone. He drained nearly all of his mana, leaving only a residual 30 points. Yet Matthew wasn't too concerned. After all, he didn't need to get his hands dirty. Yaya had already ripped apart the Murloc warriors and soared back out of the water. She hovered above, flapping her wings, acting as the final safeguard. Beelzebub charged in first, his massive frame barreling forward with unstoppable force. The Murloc Tidecaller's expression shifted as it ordered the last 2 Murloc warriors to hold the line. Simultaneously, 2 Murloc diviners hastily began casting spells. They summoned 2 towering water elementals, hoping to block Beelzebub's path. Beelzebub sneered, wielding his twin battle axes, and slammed into the Murloc warriors. The frightened Murloc warriors braced themselves, raising their battered weapons to block the incoming axes. Crash! With a crisp sound, their weapons shattered, and the axes cleaved into the warriors' chests. The crunching of bones overshadowed the Murloc warriors' agonized screams. In just a few breaths, the warriors crumbled. The Tidecaller's buff spells never even reached them. Fear flickered in the Tidecaller's eyes as Beelzebub continued his relentless approach. The newly summoned water elementals stood firm in Beelzebub's way. They hurled blue energy spheres at his chest, only to splash harmlessly against his magic barrier. Second-tier spell, Mana Shield. Unhindered, Beelzebub's axes sliced through the water elementals. His momentum carried him forward, and with a single swing, he split a Murloc diviner encased in ice armor in 2. The other, overwhelmed by fear, tried to flee. But it was too slow, falling under Beelzebub's next strike. Fully harnessing the power of his bloodline, wielding enchanted weapons, and bolstered by spells, Beelzebub's combat prowess was staggering. Facing his overwhelming strength, the Murlocs were no more than firewood beneath his blade. The Murloc Tidecaller despaired under Beelzebub's crushing pressure. All the remaining Murlocs had been held off by Matthew's companions. From commanding tens of thousands to being utterly alone, this had all unfolded in just a little over 10 minutes. Crash! Beelzebub's heavy axe shattered the Tidecaller's icy shield. Just as he twisted his axe to finish it off with a grin, the Murloc Tidecaller's eyes turned pitch black. It opened its mouth and an invisible, eerie shockwave burst forth. Beelzebub froze in place, his mind going blank. Even with his extraordinary constitution and frost giant bloodline, he couldn't withstand this strange attack. Matthew's expression changed as realization dawned, 5th-tier spell, Mind Storm. But the problem was, Murlocs didn't normally possess psychic abilities. The shockwave was spreading fast. If it fully unleashed, everyone except the tough-skinned Beelzebub could be in mortal danger. Thinking quickly, Matthew instantly spent 5 skill points to max out Quick Casting to level 5. Quick Casting LV5, 200% right, 300% faster casting speed, 10% spell success rate bonus. Instinctively, Matthew cast Melf's Acid Arrow, the bolt flying like lightning and hitting the Murloc Tidecaller square in the face. Sizzle! Its scream echoed across the Silvermoon riverbank. Angela, dazed, shook her head, feeling warm liquid drip from her nose. She looked at Matthew and saw no sign of pain on his face beneath the cloak. Only then did she relax a little. The others, clutching their throbbing heads, stared in shock at the Murloc Tidecaller's corpse, its skull corroded. They all felt immense relief. Thank the Lord for Matthew's intervention. Things could have gotten dangerous. Then, even Beelzebub looked somewhat ashamed. Everyone felt they had been useless. Though Matthew had created the best conditions for them, they still felt they had fallen short. As everyone remained silent, Matthew studied the Murloc Tidecaller's body thoughtfully, reading the system's notification. Ding, you killed a Murloc Tidecaller Naga emissary, earning 3,000 experience points and 1 skill point. Ding, you've acquired information about the Naga emissary. Spend 1,000 experience points to analyze it. The ever more intelligent system seemed to be learning to demand experience points on its own now. Matthew wondered if one day it might start asking for fate coins too. That fleeting thought passed, and Matthew focused intently on the new information. Naga emissary, serving the Karmi Naga clan of the Abyssal Trench in the Sea of Death. A short line that cost Matthew 1,000 experience points. That's the price of killing 1,000 Murlocs, but Matthew felt it was worth every point. The Sea of Death bordered the eastern province and was vast and treacherous, hiding islands and terrifying relics. The Abyssal Trench, a notorious region in the Sea of Death, was well known to Matthew. It would one day be the primary battleground for the Naga and the Farsico Empire. The Karmi Naga clan was even more significant. A colossal Naga clan with millions of Nagas and billions of enslaved sea beasts. In a few years, the Karmi Naga clan would begin extending its reach to the mainland, triggering the devastating Naga tides. I thought the Naga wouldn't make their move so soon, but they've already started planting their seeds. Could this Murloc unrest be their doing, whether it's gathering intelligence or sowing chaos? The Naga are definitely causing trouble for the mainland forces. Looks like profiting from the Murloc's destruction won't be possible, but others might find this information valuable. Chapter 153. Recycling Murlocs. Chapter 153. Recycling Murlocs. After eliminating the elite Murlocs led by the Murloc Tidecaller, the remaining Murlocs, half destroyed by the delicious potion, scattered. Like frightened birds fleeing for their lives. Old John surveyed the battlefield, holding a pile of broken junk in his hands, muttering helplessly, even kobolds aren't as poor as Murlocs. Apart from the decent amount of experience points, the slain Murloc warriors and diviners offered almost no useful loot. Even the Murloc Tidecaller's ebony staff was merely a good quality raw material. It could only be sold for 2,000 gold coins, not even enough to cover the cost of the concealment scroll. Although it wasn't profitable, Matthew didn't consider it a loss. He returned to the city and issued new orders, 1 silver coin for each recovered Murloc corpse. Some Murlocs aren't dead, have the kobolds dig some large pits and corral them. This was just a temporary solution. Matthew planned to have the kobolds dig and build large underground breeding farms. Since Murlocs reproduced so easily, it would be wasteful not to take advantage of that. Additionally, Murlocs had a broad diet. They could eat algae, water plants, small fish and shrimp, or even food scraps, and thrive quite well. They were excellent scavengers. Plus, the cultivation of magic taro required large amounts of flesh and blood. Now there was a clear supply. Even Murloc waste, after proper processing, might serve as excellent fertilizer, Matthew speculated. A multi-purpose resource, perhaps more functions will reveal themselves in the future. Ralph's eyes lit up, and he immediately began organizing the arrangements. Although he didn't know Matthew's exact intentions, Ralph would support and execute them to the fullest. After briefly explaining the Murloc breeding plan and notifying the kobolds to begin work, Matthew prepared to return to the manor. He needed to prepare quickly. Bay territory needed to seize the next opportunity for growth. Watching Matthew's departing figure, Alios felt a sense of relief wash over her. Before she could process her emotions, old John waved her over. Come on, it's time to distribute the spoils of war at the barracks. Blinking in surprise, Alios could clearly sense that no one cared about her appearance, only her strength mattered. Phew! Yaya glided down gently and followed Matthew into the study, yawning as her illusionary form faded away. Without Rebecca around, Yaya had been sleeping much more frequently. Fortunately, Yaya could meditate while she slept, so it didn't hinder her growth. Matthew set aside his cloak and weapons, dismissed his illusionary clone, and emerged from the hidden chamber. As usual, he activated detection magic to ensure there was no surveillance before recording the information about the Naga and the deep sea. The early Naga activity gave Matthew significant insights. Many known events may have had signs earlier than anticipated. Matthew revisited various pieces of information, organizing and categorizing them more meticulously. After finishing this task, Matthew focused his attention on the imminent opportunity in the Misty Swamp. In the next couple of days, an underground ruin buried in the mud of the Misty Swamp would be unearthed. It was the site of a medium-sized city, remarkably well preserved. Its destruction was akin to what befell Sweetwater Town centuries ago. Thousands of years ago, the city had fallen during a major crisis. Due to its sturdy construction and burial deep underground, hundreds of meters beneath solid rock, much of the treasure within had remained intact. This site would attract many adventurers from Blood Moon City who were keen on relic hunting. If that was all, it would merely be another ruin among the many scattered across the Blood Moon City region, not particularly noteworthy to Matthew. What made this ruin famous and drew thousands of adventurers and players was a unique creature within, the sky-splitting lizard. These massive lizards with mid to high tier strength were incredibly dangerous and lived in large groups, numbering in the tens of thousands. They had completely taken over the city, surviving by feeding on the underground river's resources in the Misty Swamp. What made them truly sought after was their ability to produce rare spatial crystals inside their bodies. These crystals were essential for crafting spatial tools, casting spatial spells, and performing spatial modifications. Matthew's carriage and loot storage belt both relied on these rare, expensive materials. A single thumb-sized spatial crystal could easily fetch over 1,000 gold coins. It took hunting down 10 sky-splitting lizards to extract one spatial crystal from their bodies, a treasure worth millions of gold coins. For most mid to high-tier adventurers, this opportunity was extremely enticing. In Matthew's memory, the ruin, dubbed Skysplitter City, had remained popular for nearly 3 or 4 years. Eventually, adventurers had nearly wiped out the lizards, with the remaining ones fleeing through the underground river, disappearing without a trace. Initially, Matthew had considered quietly discovering and gradually exploiting the ruin, reaping all the benefits for himself. But such an approach was too time-consuming, and Matthew wasn't willing to waste valuable manpower in this dangerous underground site. Thus, Matthew devised another plan. 2 hours later, Ralph entered the study after finishing his tasks, still carrying the faint scent of fish. Matthew didn't mind handing over some documents. After Ralph read them, his expression shifted to shock as Matthew smiled and said, "Tomorrow, send a team to support the Murloc camp. We need a large number of Murloc corpses for fertilizer. If anyone wants to take on the job, offer them 2 silver coins per Murloc. Let's start a large-scale collection." Though Ralph didn't fully grasp Matthew's intentions for collecting Murlocs in bulk, he nodded without hesitation and cautiously asked, "Technically, that isn't our territory. Could other nobles come?" And, with a faint smile, Matthew calmly responded, "If someone wants to spend a fortune building a proper city in the dangerous, unproductive Misty Swamp, using such costly land development to claim ownership of a piece of territory, why should we object? Wouldn't that just guarantee a steady customer base for our food and resources? Competitors? Not a chance." Ralph was taken aback. He had never considered such a plan from the Lord. But it had every possibility of becoming reality. Surely no one would be foolish enough to do that, right? Chapter 154, Rumors. Chapter 154, Rumors. The next day, early morning. The bright sunlight illuminated the newly built Bay town, signaling the start of a new day. The residential areas under construction were bustling again. Workers from various factories also began heading out. The pioneers had already received the news. Work resumed as usual today. The people of Bay Territory, still shaken by the Murloc rampage the day before, were soon surprised to discover. The gates, tightly closed yesterday, were now wide open, just like any other day. Lined-up soldiers were patrolling the walls. Everything seemed unchanged. However, when they ventured outside the gates, they could see the battlefield, still littered with Murloc remains, and the struggling Murloc captives. When word spread that killing a Murloc and returning its corpse could earn them a bounty of 1 silver coin, and capturing a live Murloc could fetch 2 silver coins, many began to feel tempted. But most reconsidered after glancing at the cultivated fields and recalling the Bay Territory's military benefits for both reservists and regular soldiers. They didn't want to lose out on the bigger prize by chasing small gains. However, for weaker adventurers who found it difficult to venture into the dangerous dark forest to capture trolls, this presented an excellent bounty opportunity. They could start by accepting a patrol mission along the Silvermoon River near Bay Territory, earning a daily wage of 1 silver coin. While on patrol, they could enjoy a free lunch and freely hunt or capture Murlocs along the riverbank. With a bit of effort, each adventurer could earn around 3 to 5 silver coins in half a day. Accumulating, that would result in a decent fortune. To further motivate these novice adventurers, Matthew issued a special decree. Anyone who accumulates 100 contribution points will be entitled to a free course in the territory, gaining a basic ability, specialty. This had immense appeal for beginner adventurers who wished to improve their strength but lacked the money, resources, or connections. Naturally, Matthew wanted to integrate adventurers with job levels into his territory. But everyone had their own ambitions and challenges, so Matthew wouldn't force them. As long as they work for me, provide experience points, and contribute to the territory, they are good tools. The transport convoy, escorted by 300 soldiers, exited the gates and headed toward the Misty Swamp's Murloc camp. Along the way, the soldiers marched in formation, attracting attention from many onlookers. Their synchronized movements, finely crafted armor, gleaming weapons, and the enticing benefits posted on bulletin boards all silently urged them. Eat well, train hard, become a reserve soldier, and change your destiny. Matthew observed their hopeful and ambitious gazes, breaking down the deeper meaning behind their looks to Angela and Yaya. The reason we don't directly select from among them is twofold. First, it's to maintain a sense of fairness. Even a degree of perceived fairness can significantly boost their sense of belonging. The second reason is to encourage competition. Soldiers, citizens, and adventurers alike will naturally compare themselves to others. Our task is simple. Establish clear, straightforward standards, select the right talents according to the rules, and the rest will work hard on their own. This applies to the management personnel we are about to select as well. This approach is far more effective than wielding a whip behind them, pushing them forward. Of course, Matthew didn't yet mention the deeper aspects, because everything he described was an ideal state, free from external interference. This was just a transitional system in Matthew's grander vision. He had even better plans for the future. The convoy gradually left Bay Territory, departing the vast, flat wilderness and heading toward the Murloc camp in the Misty Swamp. They would arrive before sunset. Meanwhile, in Blood Moon City, on Adventurous Street, the adventure hall, though modest in decoration, was bustling with activity. Normally, despite the high foot traffic, adventurers typically came and went in a hurry. Rarely did they gather in such numbers to engage in constant discussion. A few curious adventurers entered, hoping to pick up some free rumors at the start of the day. Even if the gossip didn't lead to tasks or bounties, it could still serve as entertainment over meals or idle chatter during adventures. A young adventurer squeezed his way inside. His first sight was the arcane screen in the adventurer hall, displaying a task list in pale blue letters. Ordinarily, blue-colored tasks, indicating moderate difficulty, wouldn't garner much attention. But when the young adventurer read the task's content, he was stunned. Bounty, 5000 gold coins for locating an entrance to an underground ruin near Misty Swamp, Bay Territory, or the Murloc Camp. Current adventurers accepted, 6,875. Task requirement, level 1 adventurer. He couldn't help but gasp, eyes widening as he reread the task details over and over. 5000 gold coins. Is this for real? I know Misty Swamp, but where's Bay Territory? Who's the Lord? This task has no level requirement. Then as a level 2 rogue, I could take it. Is this task real or fake? In just a minute or two, he saw the number of adventurers accepting the task increase by several hundred. Hearing other adventurers' conversations, the young man became even more excited. This task must be real, not to mention, the person offering the 1000 gold coin deposit is none other than the recently famous Adam Smith. Adam Smith. The one from the Thorn Merchant Guild. Yes, the same one who took down the Redwood Merchant Guild. I heard about that. Redwood's Reld Bacon gathered over 2,000 bandits, but couldn't take down Thorn's caravan. Adam Smith acted innocent on the surface, but secretly had everyone in the Redwood Merchant Guild wiped out. Even the entire Bacon family was eliminated. How did I miss such big news? It's been the talk of the town. The city lord even sent people to investigate the Bacon family estate. There's been no word since. Seems like Adam Smith was very thorough. The young adventurer stopped listening to the rest of the story. All he could see in his mind were those shining 5000 gold coins. Chapter 155. Murloc Castle. Chapter 155. Murloc Castle. The red glow pierced through the misty water vapor, outlining a rainbow of colors. A gentle breeze blew, dispersing the bright light. Only a faint mist remained, lingering in solitude. The patrolling soldiers stared longingly into the fog. The figure they were waiting for still had not appeared. Bored, they glanced at the constantly howling murlocs, too tired to deal with them anymore. At that moment, a deafening roar came from above. The soldiers heard the familiar sound, and their faces lit up with joy, shouting, "It's Lord Yea, the Lord must have sent someone. HMPH, the village chief of field said so this morning, but you didn't believe him. Now you know you were wrong, huh? Hes, finally someone came to help us deal with these murlocs. Hey, don't get too cocky. Get ready for battle, we still need to open the gate to assist them." A dull sound echoed through the air, as Yea's silver-white figure gracefully landed on the wall, letting out a long howl. Without any high-ranking murlocs in charge, the murloc horde, terrified by the dragon's might, collapsed to the ground in fear before scattering in all directions, leaving only footprints in the muddy ground. Finding it boring, Yea flapped her wings and soared back into the sky under the soldiers' admiring gazes. Not long after, a clear cry echoed from the distance. The village chief of field, who stood atop the camp, signaled for the horn to be blown, his brows showing a hint of tension. The murloc camp in the swamp had already attracted an attack from thousands of murlocs. Would Bay Town, situated by the Silvermoon River, face even greater danger? Fortunately, people from Bay Town had arrived, which meant there should be no danger. Half an hour later, the village chief of field heard Beelzebub say, Bay Town had been attacked by tens of thousands of murlocs, but under the Lord's command they were easily dealt with, prompting him to sincerely exclaim, "Thank goodness the Lord is here, or we'd be in big trouble." Recalling the agony of being hit by a mind storm, Beelzebub instinctively rubbed his head and nodded in agreement, saying, "That's right. If it weren't for the Lord's foresight in spending a great deal to build the walls, the town would have suffered heavy losses. If Beelzebub hadn't brought it up, the village chief of field wouldn't have realized." After a few clicks of astonishment, he curiously asked, "Why did the Lord send the Arcanist back to the murloc camp? What's the purpose?" Before Beelzebub could answer, Matthew, who was slowly approaching, said aloud, "Gather everyone in the camp. Every single person should know the Lord's orders. Knight Angela, you will now announce the Lord's orders." The village chief of field was slightly startled. He held deep respect for this mysterious Arcanist, who had suddenly arrived in the territory. It wasn't just because of his power, but also his mystery. Endless fireball spells. Swift casting of various spells with just a wave of his hand. An unfathomable and overwhelming presence. All of this made the village chief of field extremely curious. Angela nodded. Regarding the Lord's arrangements to conceal his identity, she would only fully cooperate. Once everyone, including the construction team, had gathered, Angela loudly announced, according to the Lord's information, a sizable underground ruin has been discovered in the area near the Murloc camp. In the near future, many adventurers will come to explore this underground ruin. The purpose of our Murloc camp is to provide convenience for these adventurers, assisting them in better exploring the ruins. Of course, during this period, we must maintain order and ensure that the Lord's will and laws are effectively enforced. Our first task is to quickly transform the Murloc Sea Amp into a Murloc castle. Angela's clear voice echoed through the entire camp, bringing unexpected excitement to all the soldiers and construction workers. It turned out that the Lord had sent them here not just to stand guard, but had entrusted them with a more important mission. Seeing that no one seemed to object, Angela continued with momentum. Everyone's hard work will naturally be rewarded. Every soldier will receive a daily subsidy of 2 silver coins, and the construction workers will receive a daily subsidy of 1 silver coin. Upon hearing this, the already motivated crowd became even more enthusiastic. The Lord certainly hadn't forgotten them. As night fell, the construction workers did not rest. They seized the last moments to conduct measurements. They needed to make further modifications and adjustments to the construction plan. The soldiers rotated their shifts and rested to ensure maximum stamina and combat strength. Angela led patrols throughout the camp, checking and reinforcing any potential weaknesses in the defenses. After a busy day in the laboratory, Matthew projected his consciousness over, ready to relax and at the same time search for the general location of the ruins. After all, the sooner the ruins were discovered, the quicker his plans for making money and development could proceed. Yaya, who had been snoring for half the day, perked up, ready for adventure. This little creature had become increasingly fond of controlling her illusion clones for combat and exploration. After confirming that most of the work in the camp was progressing steadily, Matthew delegated authority to Angela. Under her curious gaze, Matthew climbed onto Yaya's slightly larger back, and together they flew into the sky. Watching their departing figures, Angela took a deep breath and began training, preparing to make up for the time lost during the journey. Despite having many flying experiences, the more authentic feeling still made Matthew marvel. Only in games do they care about balance and completeness. In the real world, flying requires so many considerations. The howling winds, the ever-lowering temperature as they ascended, the narrowing view as their speed increased. After experiencing it firsthand, Matthew concluded that unless one's strength was sufficient, it was better not to attempt flying too often. The higher you fly, the harder you fall. After casting a mana shield on himself and fine-tuning the sensitivity, Matthew finally withstood the blowing wind and shifted his focus to the misty swamp below. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he could see nothing below. So Matthew simply closed his eyes and began honing his perception. There was nothing else to do. Announcement: a big thank you to Fam for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 156. Something's off. Chapter 156. Something's off. Staring at the blood-red moonlight in the sky, Matthew's expression was somewhat dazed. He kept feeling that something was wrong, but he couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. Matthew shook his head slightly, pushing aside distracting thoughts, and transmitted the coordinates from his memory to Yaya. Matthew hadn't shared this information openly at the camp, naturally to conceal the source of the intelligence. Some things can't be made too obvious. However, unexpected things can sometimes happen quickly. Just as Yaya was about to descend, she seemed to sense something and suddenly said, "Wait a moment, there's someone below." Having been taught by Matthew himself, Yaya's way of handling things gradually became more like his. She didn't like to rush in blindly, she preferred to plan carefully before acting. Upon noticing the figures below, she quickly shared the information with Matthew. More than 10 people were gathered around a mud pit with a diameter of about 3 meters. They were huddled together, not discussing anything, but rather stabbing each other, playing out a scene of frequent infighting. If the people below knew that Adam Smith had offered a 5,000 gold coin reward for finding the entrance to the ruins, they would probably fight even more fiercely. The attackers had come prepared, striking with deadly intent, mostly aiming for vital points. The 4 or 5 people on the other side, unprepared, were quickly cut down, leaving only one who was now running away at full speed. Originally, Matthew had no interest in them. If not necessary, he didn't want to reveal that he knew the location and coordinates. After all, in the future, when he knows a lot of information, it would be hard to explain without a reliable source, which could arouse suspicion. But there are always exceptions. The faint voice coming from the leader of the pursuing group caught Matthew's attention. "Capture her, sacrifice her, sacrifice." Upon hearing these 2 words, Matthew's mind immediately conjured up images of many disgusting individuals. An inexplicable fury surged through him. He didn't hesitate for a moment, signaling Yaya to descend. Matthew was eager to find out if these troublemakers had already extended their influence into Bay territory. Running for her life, Felicity was filled with regret. The sudden death and betrayal of her companions gnawed at her heart like a venomous snake. The other party's unabashed intent to sacrifice only deepened Felicity's fear. Our bloodline is special. We must be careful to keep it secret and not let others know. She thought of her mother's careful reminders, never expecting that the ones to betray her would be childhood playmates. Felicity remembered the savage expression on the face of the person who had pierced the captain's heart, filling her with an overwhelming sense of strangeness and panic. They had gone to great lengths to lure them into the misty swamp, all for her. Whoosh! A faint sound of something cutting through the air came, and sensing danger, Felicity twisted to dodge. She suddenly felt a shadow descend. A tough white web sealed off all her escape routes. Level 2 spell, Web. No, Felicity desperately swung her short sword, the green light in her eyes growing more intense. The tough web was actually torn open by the short sword, but after delivering that strike, she felt completely drained. She stepped into nothingness, and her entire body thudded into the soft mud. With her head throbbing in pain, Felicity saw the figures running towards her, and instinctively gripped her short sword tighter. Even if I die, I won't let these bastards succeed. Whoosh. A dark light suddenly flew toward her, striking her precisely. She felt her whole body relax, an overwhelming fatigue washing over her like a tide, her eyelids growing heavy. This is Level 2 Sleep, Roar. A thunderous roar suddenly descended from the sky, and the terrifying sound waves quickly spread. Felicity's mind instantly cleared, the drowsiness swept away. A massive pressure fell upon her, making her body tremble uncontrollably. In the depths of her emerald eyes, the green light flickered stubbornly. A huge shadow, accompanied by a sweeping wind, descended. Not far away, the faint sounds of screams and the cracking of bones echoed. Felicity had a vague sense that the ruthless and inhuman thugs from earlier were being mercilessly slaughtered by some terrifying entity. She struggled to her feet, wisely choosing not to flee. The other party could fly. Steeling herself, Felicity forced herself to look over. She saw a silver figure as fast as lightning, accompanied by a wail of anguish, fly towards her. Her legs trembled involuntarily, but she stood firm. The imagined attack and pain didn't come. Felicity watched in disbelief as the figure tilted its head, sizing her up. She couldn't help but murmur, "A dragon." Ah! The piercing scream snapped Felicity out of her daze, and she saw Yaya dragging a figure towards her with her claws. Felicity instantly recognized the figure, her cloaked employer, a cruel and evil spellcaster. "I'm sorry I'm late." The calm and gentle voice brought Felicity back to her senses. She looked up. A tall figure, cloaked as an arcanist, lightly landed in front of her. He didn't look at her, but rather at the spellcaster writhing in pain. Name, Smart Cryan Identity, Baron of the Northern Mountains of Falsic, Deacon of the Blood Moon City of the Pale Church. Race, Human Class, Level 6 Occultist Challenge Level, 8+. Talents, none. Specializations, Intermediate Specialization, Mobile Casting LV1, increases the success rate of casting spells while moving by 20%. Intermediate Specialization, Occult Camouflage LV3, conceals evil aura, undetectable by intermediate level detection spells. Intermediate Specialization, Dark Knowledge LV2, can comprehend and learn dark knowledge. Legacy, Intermediate Legacy, Bewitching Hearts, gain +5 when lying, deceiving, or ambushing. Attributes: Strength, 7 Dexterity, 11 Constitution, 8 Intelligence, 12 Perception, 9 Charisma, 14 Luck, -3 Calamity Evaluation, Fool who has succumbed to darkness. Surprise! Matthew felt quite surprised. Following his principle of sparing no cultists, he hadn't expected to catch a genuine one. The Pale Church, an old acquaintance. If the Pfizer Merchants Guild was an enemy Matthew despised and was happy to make a mortal foe, then the Pale Church was something Matthew wanted to destroy utterly, grinding each of its members to dust. This was an evil church that worshipped death. They often carried out horrific massacres and sacrifices in various places, to worship certain dark spirits or perform some inhumane rituals. Naturally, Matthew had clashed with them before, suffering considerable losses and learning a lot about them. The only regret was that Matthew didn't know much about the inner workings and strongholds of the Pale Church. But now that he knew the Pale Church had a base in Blood Moon City, Matthew was more than happy to make contact. Extending his hand, under Felicity's curious gaze, he placed it directly on Smart's head. Smart let out even more horrifying screams, his survival instincts driving him to shout, "Don't kill me, don't kill me. I can give you gold, give you enchanted gear. If you kill me, you'll be cursed. The Pale Church will hunt you endlessly. Unfazed, Matthew chuckled lightly, watching the specialization progress bar steadily rise, and said indifferently, "That suits me just fine." Chapter 157, Unease. Chapter 157, Unease. Is Matthew afraid of being hunted down? Of course he's afraid. Before fully growing, potential alone cannot be converted into immediate combat strength. Facing the relentless pursuit of the Pale Church, Matthew couldn't guarantee he'd survive unscathed. This evil church, which has been hunted and targeted by many kingdoms and organizations for thousands of years, still exists to this day. That alone speaks to its secrecy and strength. What's more, Matthew had personally fought against a high-ranking priest of the Pale Church and knew they possessed legendary-level combat power. So it's only natural to be cautious. However, the smart before him was just an ordinary occultist. He wasn't worth the Pale Church spending a great deal to cast a high-level seeker curse on him. The data-driven examination both inside and out confirmed this point. Yet Matthew didn't bother refuting it. He simply drew his slender sword and swiftly swung it down. Smart, the occultist had his hands chopped off, and the intense pain and fear made him scream even louder. Casually flicking the blood off his sword, Matthew signaled Yaya to release her grip. He grabbed Smart's head and pressed it into the soft, muddy pit. Ugh, gurgle, no, don't. The unspeakable stench from the foul water crawled into Smart's nose and mouth. Smart, who had joined the Pale Church seeking a longer life and greater pleasures, was certainly not someone with strong willpower. He was quickly reduced to a sniveling mess, begging and struggling, nearly vomiting from the ordeal. Matthew's actions were unusually brutal. Even Yaya was quite curious, having never seen Matthew this furious before. Felicity silently watched the scene unfold before her. She didn't know what Matthew's purpose was, but she vaguely felt like something within her had been switched on. The occultist Smart, who had just been so high and mighty, wielding the power of life and death, was now groveling like a dog, pleading for mercy, which made her feel an eerie sense of disbelief. But this was reality. Cold, harsh reality. At the same time, deep within Felicity's heart, a stronger desire for power awakened. If she had the strength Matthew had, her family wouldn't be in crisis, and her captain and teammates would still be alive. She resolved to get stronger. After fully absorbing all the information about mobile casting and the other 3 specializations, Matthew tossed the tearful Smart aside and finally asked, "What's your purpose for coming here?" Think carefully before answering. Spitting out the foul mud from his mouth, Smart coughed heavily, not daring to look at Matthew's cold eyes, lowering his head and howling, "The altar. It's to activate the altar." As soon as he finished speaking, the cold sword tip pierced his throat, and with another swift stroke, his head was severed. Blood splattered, falling into the muddy pit, and quickly swallowed by the murky muck. Matthew ignored the kill notification, using his sword to lift Smart's space belt from his waist and casually cast Cleanse. Watching Matthew so adeptly kill and loot the body, Felicity, who had been silent the whole time, couldn't help but bite her lip. Who wouldn't be afraid? But Matthew seemed completely unaware of it, tossing the storage belt to Yaya before turning to glance at her and saying, "We need to leave." Before Felicity could react, Yaya, holding the storage belt, grabbed her and flew up with a powerful beat of her wings. With a featherfall spell cast on himself, Matthew looked down at the faint red glow emanating from the ground below and, after smacking his lips, said under Felicity's shocked gaze, "So the altar that activates automatically when enough people die in a short time turns out to be the Pale Church's handiwork." Felicity lowered her head and witnessed a scene she would never forget in her lifetime, illuminated by the faint red moonlight. Smart's headless corpse was slowly moving toward the altar in the pit. The bodies of the thugs, even the traitor she loathed, had already risen in a strange manner. The corpses gradually lost their color, leaving behind a glaring shade of pale. The glowing altar suddenly emitted an invisible wave, passing through everything. However, nothing seemed to happen. As the mist gradually swallowed the scene below, Felicity realized she was flying higher and higher. What's the deal with that altar? Forcing herself to suppress the fear in her heart, Felicity stubbornly lifted her head and asked Matthew. Matthew, now piecing together this new puzzle about the Pale Church, had a flashback to the desolate and ruined state of Sweetwater Town. Patiently he explained, "As you saw, the altar was activated. All those who died within a certain range became sacrifices to activate it. As for the purpose, the Pale Church must be trying to open that underground ruins." Felicity was no stranger to them. Having spent over a year adventuring in Blood Moon City, she had participated in at least 10 ruin excavations and explorations. But she couldn't understand what kind of ruin required such a bizarre altar to open. What exactly is the Pale Church? And who is this mysterious arcanist? What's the difference between using everyone else as sacrifices and using her as a sacrifice? Even though her mind was full of questions, Matthew himself was feeling a bit of a headache. Don't be fooled by how easily he disposed of the occultist Smart. That was all thanks to Yea's might. If it had been just him doing the fighting, while he was confident he could take down this mid-level occultist, it certainly wouldn't have been that easy. It wasn't that Matthew didn't want to interrogate Smart more thoroughly, but he knew full well that someone of Smart's level wouldn't have more information than he already knew. Plus, the altar had already been activated, and Matthew couldn't be sure of its true purpose. But one thing was certain, the Pale Church must be very focused on it. The Murloc camp, located near the altar and the ruins, must have already fallen within the Pale Church's sights. It's even possible that Bay territory itself had come under their watch. That's why Matthew had acted so decisively. The longer he delayed, the greater the chance of exposure. Now Matthew needed to rethink his plans and prepare to deal with the Pale Church's next moves. As the Murloc camp came into view, Matthew glanced at the silent Felicity and felt a bit of regret. The timing wasn't right. Yes, the reason Matthew had been so kind to Felicity was because he recognized this still relatively young adventurer. In the future, the name of Emerald Dragon Felicity would be renowned far and wide. Matthew didn't have much personal history with Felicity, but he knew very well the importance of her future identity, vice leader of the Dragonborn Guild. The shiny +5 luck value on Felicity's attribute panel confirmed to Matthew that he hadn't mistaken her for someone else. The reason Matthew chose to build goodwill with Felicity, instead of recruiting her as a tool, was because of her other identity, sister of the governor of the Eastern Province. A true big shot. Announcement: a big thank you to Resev 2024 for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 158, Sudden Danger. Certain Death. Chapter 158, Sudden Danger. Certain Death. Name: Felicity Yao Moon. Identity: 6th heir of the Yao Moon family, sister of Annie Yao Moon, governor of the Eastern Province. Race: Half-Dragon class, level 4 ranger talent, Emerald Dragon bloodline LV1 nearly activated status, blessed with anti-prophecy, life detection, teleportation, and anti-mind magic. Specialization: legacy. Attributes: luck +5, heavenly fortune evaluation. Sometimes being born into the right family is really important. Matthew's lips twitched slightly as he saw all the layers of spells protecting Felicity. He immediately understood that Felicity had never been in any real danger. He even suspected that an extraordinary spellcaster might be invisibly following and protecting her. What Matthew didn't expect was that as soon as his attention shifted away from Felicity, her previous +5 luck value turned into pitch black, -5. At that moment, an indescribable sense of dread surged into Matthew's heart. It was as if some fatal threat was quickly closing in on him. Is there an enemy? No. Matthew quickly closed his eyes and sensed his body, realizing there was no immediate danger. Then it hit him and he silently checked his attribute panel. Luck, -5, catastrophe. A sense of panic flashed through his mind. No, where did things go wrong? Matthew instinctively took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. He didn't let this sudden change throw him into disarray, and instead of focusing on Felicity, he began to carefully analyze. If it wasn't a sudden attack, then it must be a natural progression into danger. That means my previous actions have led to this impending danger. Glancing at the oblivious Felicity, Matthew shook his head in frustration. Felicity's luck was still +5. But mine has turned into -5. Something's not right. This bizarre situation gave Matthew a headache. He couldn't quite figure out the connection between Felicity and the upcoming danger. If he had a choice, he would certainly prefer to avoid this mess. But now, even if he returned Felicity, it would only make things worse. Matthew rubbed his forehead in frustration, cursing fate's choice in his heart. It's always so prompt with its warnings, yet when it comes to life and death, it doesn't give me a heads up. Though he grumbled, Matthew knew well that blaming fate wouldn't help. Solving the danger was the priority. He looked at the shivering Felicity and sighed inwardly, casting a mana shield on her. Seeing her grateful expression, Matthew could now pretty much conclude he was caught in an undeserved disaster. But Matthew didn't want to dwell on it. He signaled Yea to fly as fast as possible. Yea sensed Matthew's unease. Though she didn't know what had happened, she obediently followed his instructions. Within a couple of minutes, Yea returned them to the Murloc camp. She released Matthew and Felicity, then pretended to yawn and quickly ducked into a tent. Matthew nodded at Angela as she approached and said to Felicity, "Don't think about the altar and ruins anymore. That's not something you can deal with right now. Stay in the camp tonight. Angela will arrange things for you." After much thought, Matthew didn't reveal Felicity's identity, but also chose not to interact with her further. His mind was consumed with the impending catastrophe. That was the real problem. Based on his knowledge of the Pale Church, Matthew was certain they were familiar with the ruins or had plans for them, hence their preparations. As for the unexpected encounter with Felicity, Matthew didn't think it was a coincidence. Matthew even suspected that he had already been pulled into a larger conspiracy. Unfortunately, things had escalated too quickly, forcing Matthew to react on the spot. Matthew entered the tent, sitting cross-legged as his consciousness quickly shifted. Baytown Lord's Manor. As soon as his consciousness returned, Matthew instinctively rubbed his temples. He organized his thoughts and prepared to consider how to deal with the upcoming crisis. The Pale Church was one issue. These evil scum, they were bound to stir up trouble. Matthew could pretty much guess their goal, something hidden within the underground ruins. The Pale Church's actions were usually straightforward and direct. Although personal grudges existed, they typically didn't complicate matters unnecessarily. Matthew didn't believe he had enough charisma to attract the Pale Church's attention at this stage. Whether or not the Pale Church noticed the mutated altar was still up in the air. Moreover, the fact that the Pale Church had targeted this ruin indicated that the ruins themselves were quite extraordinary. Matthew could confidently assume that the first person to discover the ruins was likely placed there by the Pale Church. If the Pale Church had sufficient power, they wouldn't have caused such a public uproar. The reverse information gave Matthew some peace of mind. At the very least, Matthew and Bay Territory still had a chance to fight back. But the real headache was Annie Yao Moon, the governor of the Eastern Province. As a true governor of the Netheral Empire, Annie was among the highest-ranking individuals, second only to the Seventon Council. Not to mention, as the governor of a province, Annie herself had to possess extraordinary abilities as a high-level arcanist. In terms of power and influence, Annie was far beyond Matthew's current reach, even considering the backing of the Sir family. Without knowing Annie's intentions, Matthew was reluctant to have much contact with Felicity. At the same time, this sudden incident had served as a wake-up call for Matthew. He needed to increase his strength as quickly as possible. Even though his luck stat was still +1, Matthew still felt uneasy. The feeling of being powerless left him feeling unsettled. After some contemplation, Matthew decisively walked into the secret chamber, where Yaya, sensing his tension, stared at him curiously. What happened? Gently patting her head and noticing how much she had grown, Matthew blinked with a hint of regret. Yaya was still too small. Time was of the essence, and there wasn't enough to let Yaya fully master her bloodline and evolve again. So Matthew had no choice but to focus on himself. With this in mind, Matthew laid out all his cards, carefully calculating his resources. Experience points, 56,000 skill points, 12 fate coins, 5,000. Using the experience points to level up would raise Matthew's class level to 7. But the difference in combat power between a low-level arcanist and a mid-level arcanist wasn't enough to counter the -5 catastrophe. The effects of skill points were similarly insufficient. So Matthew's last hope lay in his 5,000 fate coins. These were his rewards for saving 5,000 people from certain death and giving them a second chance at life. Now he needed to turn his own certain death fate around. Chapter 159, Tai Jai. Chapter 159, Tai Jai. If there's a way, just show it directly. It seemed that Matthew's call had been heard. The data display from the passive ability of the legendary feat Fate's Choice once again gave a prompt. Ding, would you like to consume 40,000 experience points and 5,000 fate coins to strengthen the legendary feat Fate's Choice? This appetite is truly enormous. Rubbing his fingertips, Matthew shook his head helplessly. He once naively thought that he could control his own fate through his own efforts without relying on this ability. Now it seems his efforts weren't enough. Firmly remembering this moment, Matthew chose to agree. After all, the sense of crisis was growing stronger, as if it was about to become reality. Matthew didn't dare gamble with his life, just like when he first arrived in this world. If he chose wrong, he would face the despair of a black dragon's breath. A dazzling blue light began to gradually radiate from Matthew's body. Yaya also saw this scene, sensing the omnipresent danger, and unhesitatingly moved closer. The blue light enveloped them both entirely. To Matthew's surprise this time, he could clearly see the changes. The flickering blue light slowly surrounded his soul, attempting to remodel it once again. However, what made Matthew uneasy was that the deadly threat did not dissipate as the blue light approached. Instead, it reached a peak that made his soul tremble. Matthew suddenly widened his eyes, only to see that the blue light surging forward was not acting on the soul, adorned with spell runes and model patterns, but rather aiming directly at the depths of his soul. There was something there. Something was devouring the power of the fate coins. Matthew shuddered, staring blankly at the gradually thickening blue threads. They originated from the depths of his soul, and upon closer inspection, at the source of the blue threads, he saw a twisted face. It was none other than the goddess of fate, Tai Jai, whom Matthew had once killed and dragged down with him. A flash of lightning streaked through his mind, and Matthew finally understood. The oddities in his thoughts and actions over the past 2 days, as well as the various coincidences he'd encountered, all stemmed from the same place. Tai Jai's primal power was fate itself, and the silent design was her handiwork. Matthew had been careless. The smooth journey so far had made him feel uneasy, yet he couldn't pinpoint where the danger was coming from. And now Tai Jai had finally obtained what she wanted. The power to alter the fate of 5,000 lives. The dazzling blue light was gradually being absorbed by Tai Jai. Her once broken form was becoming clearer. It was an incomparably beautiful face, unforgettable at first glance, deeply captivating. Only her eyes were filled with endless venom. She let out a sharp roar that echoed in Matthew's sea of consciousness. Damn and lowly mortal, how dare you? How dare you commit the sin of Dayside? Matthew cracked a smile, calm yet confident, and spoke softly with tranquility. You want me dead, so I dare to take your life. This is true fairness, this is fate itself. Even though he realized something was wrong, Matthew would never admit defeat in front of her. He tried to open his eyes and leave his meditative state. But the surging blue light firmly trapped his consciousness, making it impossible to control his body. The power of fate, which had always been Matthew's trump card and cheat, finally revealed its price. The more blue light it absorbed, the more Tai Jai's once dissipated body began to manifest. Hearing Matthew's reply, and recalling her own torment and suffering, Tai Jai let out a hysterical roar. How dare you speak of fate so arrogantly? You are nothing but a mere mortal. Surrounded by the blue light, Tai Jai charged fiercely towards Matthew's consciousness. Matthew tried to dodge, but was trapped in the ocean of consciousness, with no room to escape. He watched helplessly as Tai Jai's grotesque and twisted face collided with him. Boom! At the moment of contact, Matthew's vision went black. He felt a sharp blow to his thoughts, as terrifying pain and endless agony spread from Tai Jai's body. Matthew felt an unspeakable scorching heat, along with an incomparable terrifying pressure crushing his body bit by bit. Yet his body was incredibly resilient, and in this repeated tearing and grinding, endless pain was born. Tai Jai's once venomous expression suddenly vanished. Replaced by an indescribable joy, she laughed wildly at the sight of Matthew's pained consciousness. Does it hurt? Does it ache? What you're feeling is but a fraction of what I've endured. But don't worry, once I take over your body, we will have all the time in the world to talk. Speaking of which, I should thank you. You allowed me to cross the true river of fate, to undergo fate's baptism and become a true goddess of fate. I can almost hear fate laughing. Ha ha ha. As she spoke, Tai Jai's entire body transformed into strands of blue light, seeping into Matthew. Bit by bit, it began to envelop him, gradually penetrating deeper. Matthew was surrounded by pain, and he realized that this was Tai Jai's experience, her memories of torment. Countless fragments of memories turned into chaotic thoughts, constantly bombarding Matthew's consciousness. This was also a form of attack, and an exceptionally deadly one. Matthew struggled, but could only barely hold on amidst the torrent of painful memories. Tai Jai had existed for an untold number of years, her memories spanning tens of thousands of years, terrifying and vast. Even though Matthew's mind was sharp, he could only barely hold on in the face of this unprecedented memory crush. What filled Matthew with even more despair was the twisted and terrifying consciousness that was slowly creeping into the depths of his mind through Tai Jai's tentacles. It was slowly infiltrating, spreading, and devouring all his memories, taking control of his mind. Unspeakable fear completely enveloped Matthew. He could feel that once it fully spread, his thoughts, consciousness, memories, and wisdom, even his entire body, would be completely replaced. What would replace him was the god who had crossed time and space with him, enduring the crushing and grinding of the river of time, yet still not dying, Tai Jai. A genderless voice echoed layer upon layer in Matthew's consciousness, filled with joy and the arrogance of impending rebirth. Don't worry, I will inherit everything from you. Your thoughts, your will, your body. And even your territory. You will be able to clearly see everything I do to them, but you will be powerless to stop it, only able to endure eternal torment. You, a pathetic mortal, cry forever, this is your fate, and I will be reborn in this world becoming the master of fate. I am fate. Chapter 160, The Time Candle Dragon. Chapter 160, The Time Candle Dragon. Thunderous voices echoed one after another through Matthew's sea of consciousness. But now he could no longer respond or resist, only watch helplessly as everything slipped away. Just as the terrifying will was about to completely consume Matthew and replace him entirely, a crisp cry rang out, softly reverberating throughout the soul world. Yeah! Time rewind. The horrifying laughter abruptly stopped, and Tai Jai's spreading will and tendrils rapidly retracted, returning to their original form. Matthew could clearly feel the overwhelming terror weakening at an astonishing rate. It's Yaya, time reversal. On the brink of despair, Matthew's eyes snapped open wide, a glimmer of hope rising in his heart. The excruciating pain gradually subsided, and his thoughts began to move again. Once Tai Jai invades my consciousness, our minds and thoughts will merge into one. With her vast memory and strength, I won't be able to resist. She'll devour me completely and take over. So, the key to breaking free is preventing her from getting close. Matthew carefully surveyed his surroundings. But throughout his entire sea of consciousness, he couldn't find anything capable of resisting the eerie blue light, the power of fate. Neither thought, will, nor soul could become Matthew's weapon or shield. The power of fate drew closer, unchecked. Because this power of fate was emanating from Matthew's soul itself. It now had its own will, its own consciousness, and it wanted to rebel. Perhaps from the moment Matthew began using the power of fate's choice, this backlash was inevitable. The power to alter fate had likely been quietly absorbed by Tai Jai from the start. What now? How could he defeat this monster lurking deep within his soul? At that moment, Matthew suddenly felt that the reversal of willpower was beginning to slow down. This meant Yaya's power was nearly depleted. But Tai Jai's twisted tendrils still had a third of the way to go before they left his consciousness. Time is running out, ugh. Dad, I can't hold on. Matthew slowly closed his eyes. He could clearly hear Yaya's frustrated sobbing and Tai Jai's silent mockery and glee. Accept your fate. Mortals can never defeat gods. I am your destiny, destiny. Matthew muttered to himself. Seeing his reaction, Tai Jai let out a deafening laugh. Once time resumed its normal flow, she would make Matthew endure the same suffering she had once experienced. Time. In that instant, clarity struck, and Matthew's gaze fell upon the attribute panel that had always seemed like a trap. So this is it, Matthew chuckled softly, finally realizing the truth. External power is only ever external. Real strength comes from within. Under Yaya's bewildered gaze and Tai Jai's smug laughter, he closed his eyes. The brilliant blue light washed over Matthew's soul, making it more solid, more complex. An indescribable coolness flowed through Matthew's consciousness, erasing the lingering pain and sharpening his thoughts and memories. Ding, you have spent 4,000 experience points to raise your Arcanist level to LV5. The familiar, pleasant sound rang out clearly. Tai Jai, waiting in anticipation, blinked in confusion before letting out a triumphant laugh. Ha ha ha, just a mere Arcanist. Ding, you have spent 10,000 experience points to raise your Arcanist level to LV6. Ding. You have reached mid-tier and activated your bloodline power. With his experience points nearly depleted, Tai Jai's previously distorted and crumbling face twisted into a sneer of disdain. No matter how hard you struggle, it's useless. A mere bloodline can't stand against a god's power, and that pesky little lizard of yours, once I'm done here, I'll make sure to deal with. Shit, Matthew didn't argue. He quietly felt the power of his hidden bloodline deep within. It quickly began affecting his soul, intricate patterns extending like branches and vines. The complexity and brilliance of these patterns far surpassed even his mid-tier Arcanist advancement. A special, indescribable power began to envelop Matthew's consciousness. Tai Jai, her expression still twisted with malice, suddenly felt a sense of unease as she looked at Matthew's now calm and composed face. She sensed the last vestiges of Yaya's time-reversing power fading away, and eagerly tried to extend her tendrils to seize control of Matthew's consciousness once again. As long as she accomplished that, no matter what Matthew had left, he would be powerless to stop her. After that, even the thought of resistance would never cross his mind. However, despite all of Tai Jai's efforts, her insidious tendrils remained motionless, and instead began retracting just as they had earlier. This is impossible. What kind of power is this? How can it control me? Matthew's soul opened its eyes, and within his pitch-black irises, tiny points of light flickered. He raised his hand and clenched it toward Tai Jai's fractured phantom from a distance. The tendrils of her consciousness, now retreating on their own, released the power of fate they had absorbed as it slowly dissipated. Tai Jai's eyes were filled with disbelief as she strained to activate the power of fate, but she couldn't even slow it down. Meanwhile, Matthew spoke in a calm, gentle voice to the disbelieving Tai Jai. Maybe to you, I'm just a mortal. Maybe you never truly understood the secret hidden within me. Tai Jai watched in horror as all her tendrils were completely withdrawn, constantly wondering why. Sensing her confusion, Matthew patiently continued. You see, you never understood why a mere level 1 Arcanist like me could form a life bond with Yaya. Why when I formed life bonds with other higher magical creatures, it didn't repair my soul. Hearing Matthew's questions, Tai Jai's face, now starting to crumble again, glared at him with hatred in her eyes. Seeing that Tai Jai still wasn't interested in understanding, Matthew simply shrugged and continued, speaking to himself. The reason is actually quite simple. Yair and I are beings of the same level. I gave her wisdom and she gave me the seed of strength. We both wield the power of time. On Matthew's attribute panel, the long-dormant talent finally began to reveal itself amidst flickering light and shadow. Candle Dragon Bloodline LV2, Master of Time, Reverser of Time. Chapter 161, I Saw It. Chapter 161, I Saw It. This is impossible. Tai Jai stared in terror as the blue light that had been steadily seeping into her was now being peeled away, returning to surround Matthew's soul. Matthew's soul trembled slightly. Even though Tai Jai was now nothing but a remnant of a soul, even though she had merged with his very being, the indirect time reversal still cost Matthew an enormous amount of power. That's right, Matthew hadn't directly used time reversal on Tai Jai, he had used it on himself. Time was rewound to an hour ago. Back to when Matthew hadn't yet engaged in battle, when the strange altar hadn't yet affected his luck. Indeed, Matthew had also uncovered the truth behind Felicity's luck. Tai Jai was the goddess of fate. Matthew wouldn't allow himself to be swayed by fate. And since Tai Jai was a part of his soul, when the overall state of his soul changed, this small part of her required more energy to maintain and resist. What Matthew hadn't expected was that maintaining time reversal was extremely taxing. 310 points of mana only sustained the spell for little over 10 breaths. Just as Matthew believed time reversal was about to fail, everything suddenly went black. When Matthew could see again, he found himself witnessing long-forgotten memories. He had just been born, but it wasn't in a warm, cozy delivery room. It was in a spacious, yet dimly lit, metallic laboratory. Matthew immediately recognized the alchemical equipment around him. Even though his vision was blurry, the distinguishing features of the alchemy instruments were crystal clear. The lab was silent, except for his own loud, continuous cries. Until a large pair of hands picked him up, holding him lovingly as a gentle voice whispered, "My son. I should have taken you back, but the war is intensifying and the capital needs my help." Ah, what a bunch of fools. Even though the image was somewhat blurry, Matthew could clearly see the beautiful face adorned with a soft hint of tenderness. She possessed unparalleled grace and exuded a commanding presence, with a look of disdain for her enemies, a figure both awe-inspiring and invincible. Only when she bowed her head to him did her expression melt into a smile that could thaw even the coldest heart. Suddenly, it seemed like his mother had noticed something. The smile on her face gradually faded, and from the center of her white brows, a dazzling light emerged, slowly enveloping him. The scene grew darker until it finally disappeared. Even though it was just a fleeting glimpse, Matthew saw it all with remarkable clarity. That faint gray power, it was like the time power displayed by a high-tier legendary time dragon. The power of time. An unceasing stream of time energy flowed from within Matthew, working faster to restore Tai Jai to her original state. Her body returned to its previously broken form. In the end, Tai Jai was reduced to a twisted and grotesque face, retreating slowly yet resolutely into the depths of Matthew's soul. Lowering his hand gently, Matthew felt immense relief and warmth. Not only did he have his bloodline power, but also the protection his mother had left him at birth. It seemed that when his mother made these preparations, she couldn't have foreseen the danger that Tai Jai would pose. Yet her gifts and care had indeed helped Matthew survive this ordeal. Time. No one can resist the flow of time, not even the gods. Those gentle echoes resonated in Matthew's ears. They were his mother's instructions, embedded in her bloodline. But within them, Matthew also heard an unshakable confidence. Awakening the bloodline and mastering the power of time. That was Matthew's one and only chance to turn the tide. This was also why Matthew had chosen to level up as an arcanist. Upon reaching mid-tier, the bloodline power sensed the strengthening of his soul and began to emerge. But Matthew had been forced into this. He had Yaya to thank. If it weren't for her time reversal, which had made Matthew aware of this crucial fact, he might already be living in a fate worse than death. Before today, Matthew hadn't been in a rush to reveal his bloodline power because he understood the importance of building a solid foundation. He wanted to gain more specializations and body attributes to better utilize his bloodline's strength. However, surprises always come faster than plans. Tai Jai's sudden appearance had completely thrown Matthew's plans into disarray. But it had also awakened him. While the development of his territory was vital, the improvement of his personal power was even more critical. Because his true enemies and targets were never other organizations or forces, they were the gods themselves. The power of a god was so overwhelming that it left Matthew helpless. Yet the crisis wasn't over. If Matthew stopped maintaining the time power, Tai Jai, whose plans had been exposed, would undoubtedly reappear. She would absorb the power of fate at the fastest speed possible, rapidly strengthening herself, and the entire scenario would repeat itself. Earlier, Matthew had only been defending himself. Now it was time for his counterattack. If Tai-Jai hadn't been so greedy, trying to consume him in one go, and had instead slowly developed her strength, hidden herself, and recovered fully, regaining her divine powers, even after mastering the power of time, Matthew might not have been able to deal with her. Matthew couldn't help but take a deep breath. In his pitch-black eyes, an inexplicable light flickered. That represented the power of 5,000 fate coins, now slowly merging with Matthew's soul. At an incredible speed, they fused with Matthew's soul, making his spiritual body more complex and resilient. Hidden deep within Matthew's soul, Tai-Jai stared at this spectacle in panic. This can't be happening. How can a mortal wield the power of fate? Tai-Jai could clearly feel that without the interference of time power, she could still leverage her higher mastery over the power of fate to disrupt Matthew's absorption, intercepting all of the energy. But now she was powerless. She could only watch helplessly as Matthew used the precious power of fate to strengthen his wretched soul. Even if she later succeeded in taking everything from Matthew, all she would have gained was his slightly stronger soul. The precious fate power would be gone forever. Though anxious, Tai-Jai wasn't overly alarmed. Instead, she was heartbroken, constantly spitting out curses like a bitter shrew. You filthy mortal. Even if you manage to absorb some of the fate power, you won't be able to bear it all. When your soul can't handle it, everything you're doing will have been for nothing. If you stop wasting that precious fate power now, I might reconsider tormenting you. I might even let you witness my return to divinity. That would be your honor. Announcement: a big thank you to Zelection for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 162, Gods can be killed and they can die. Chapter 162, Gods can be killed and they can die. Matthew glanced at Tai-Jai dismissively. He knew his absorption speed wasn't fast enough, and the capacity of his soul was limited. It was practically impossible to absorb all that fate power in such a short time. If Tai-Jai, exhausted and weakened as she was, managed to absorb even a small portion, she could use her divine strength and high status to recreate the scene from earlier. So Matthew had no intention of hoarding all the fate power for himself. The brilliant blue fate power passed through Matthew's soul and into the weakened Yaya via their life bond. Yaya, already frail and drained from the earlier battle, began to rapidly strengthen as she absorbed the fate power. Her previously weak soul was quickly reinforced. And to Matthew's surprise, as Yaya's soul power increased, the feedback he received further strengthened his own soul's resilience. His control over the power of time also grew stronger. As his soul digested more of the fate power, he could transfer even more to Yaya. They were mutually reinforcing each other, continuously growing stronger. This created a positive feedback loop. Just like when they first forged their life bond. Together, they devoured the dazzling fate power at an astonishing pace. Seeing this, Tai-Jai felt an inexplicable panic. As the fate power dwindled, her curses and roars gradually weakened, eventually fading into cold silence. She stared intently at Matthew and Yaya. Finally, all the fate power was consumed, becoming nourishment for the growth of Matthew and Yaya's souls. Tai-Jai, who had remained calm until now, suddenly went mad. She burst out from the depths of Matthew's soul, clawing and snarling, trying to tear these two wretched souls apart. This is impossible. How could two lowly souls possibly wield the power of fate? Give it back. Give it all back to me. I will bring you the most miserable fate. I will make you regret this for all eternity. In Tai-Jai's mind, even though Matthew and Yaya's souls had strengthened, she still believed that as a god, even reduced to a mere fragment, they could never resist her will. After all, she was a god. But things did not go as Tai-Jai had expected. Matthew's soul opened its eyes once more. There was no panic, no fear, no mockery, no pride. He simply looked calmly at the onrushing Tai-Jai. At that moment, a small crack appeared on Matthew's forehead, and a faint grey light silently fell upon Tai-Jai's face. Tai-Jai, with her grotesque expression, froze as the intangible power of time enveloped her completely. She couldn't move an inch. Matthew slowly descended, staring intently at the twisted and snarling remnant of a soul before him. Feeling his soul's energy rapidly depleting, he reached out as Tai-Jai watched in disbelief. He grasped her in his hand. Thank you for the gift of your memories, which taught me how to control and absorb the power of fate. And I must also thank you for guiding me on how to manipulate fate, rather than being driven by it. From the moment Matthew began using fate's choice, countless events and encounters had been orchestrated and manipulated by Tai-Jai. For a long time, Matthew even believed these were his own thoughts and plans. This was another of Tai-Jai's powers, the power to dictate and arrange others' fates. Seemingly free individuals under this power couldn't even muster the will to resist or struggle. Hearing Matthew's calm words, Tai-Jai, unable to break free from the encircling time, was filled with fear. She had never expected that Matthew would find such crucial memories among the countless chaotic, fragmented recollections. Regret flooded Tai Jai's heart. If she hadn't been so greedy, trying to devour Matthew all at once and indulging in her twisted desire for revenge and torment, how could she have lost such vital memories? How could he be so lucky? "I am the goddess of fate," Tai Jai roared in defiance, struggling madly. Her already broken face became even more fragmented, but all she could do was create faint ripples in the barrier of time. However, what she didn't know was that the wearied expression in Matthew's eyes was not due to the luck she imagined. To accurately obtain the power to control fate, he had painstakingly combed through nearly half of the goddess of fate's chaotic memories. With the help of time, and at the risk of his willpower nearly collapsing, he had finally found these crucial memories. Of course, Matthew wasn't about to share that with Tai Jai. He simply watched her calmly, letting her exhaust what little power she had left. Suddenly, Tai Jai stopped her frantic struggles. Even though her twisted face was now almost ethereal, she still managed to sneer, speaking in a cold, triumphant tone. "You almost had me fooled. But so what if you have mastered the power of fate? With your abilities, you can't hurt me in the slightest, you can't even scratch me, but our souls are one. As long as you continue to wield the power of fate, my strength will gradually recover. Your time power can't hold me forever. I can wait. You have no choice but to maintain the power of time. You won't grow any stronger, and I will wear you down. You're doomed." Tai Jai's face was filled with post-crisis triumph and arrogance. She couldn't help but laugh, eager to see the terror on Matthew's face, but all she saw was him nodding. Her heart skipped a beat, something felt wrong, but all she heard was Matthew's calm reply, "I know." The unease in Tai Jai's heart grew stronger and stronger. Uncertain of what Matthew's next move would be, she couldn't help but taunt him. "You can't keep the time barrier up forever, and you can't stop the fate power from seeping in. Whether you kill or save, you'll actively or passively gain fate power. As soon as it appears, I can seize control of it completely. I'll grow stronger and stronger while you'll be stuck in place. One day your body will belong to me." Matthew nodded in agreement, then gently patted Tai Jai's twisted face. He wasn't mourning the loss of time power. He was reluctant to let the special knowledge in Tai Jai's mind disappear. Yet he still sighed in regret, uttering words that filled Tai Jai with terror. "You're right, I can't kill you. Doing so would be the same as killing myself, but I don't need to harm you. On the contrary, I need to thank you." As Matthew spoke, the once radiant and brilliant soul dimmed considerably. The faint crack between his brows gushed out more time power. "Thank you for allowing me to experience the power of fate. It was a valuable lesson. In return, I'll let you experience the power of time. My mother once said that not even gods can resist the erosion of time. She also said that gods can be killed, and they can die. Announcement: a big thank you to King and Ralph for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me." Chapter 163, Divine Specialization. Fate. Chapter 163, Divine Specialization. Fate. As Matthew's hand began to emit a growing light, Tai Jai sensed the impending threat of death and let out desperate cries. "No, I was wrong. I admit my mistakes. I still have value. I know countless secrets. I know the power behind fate." She begged for her life while struggling madly. But seeing that Matthew remained unmoved, she couldn't help but roar in fury. "You foolish mortal. Stop this at once. Don't you want to know what you're missing out on?" Tai Jai's voice grew smaller and smaller, fading as Matthew wielded the power of time. Her existence gradually faded into nothingness, disappearing into the depths of Matthew's soul. And Matthew's soul began pushing forward through time. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. At that point, Matthew hadn't yet arrived in this world. He was still drifting through the river of time, enduring its dreadful cleansing and destruction. The terrifying forces tore at Matthew's soul, battering him relentlessly. Everything around him became a blur, a swirl of fleeting colors. In the past, such a force would have shredded his fragile soul to pieces. In fact, if it hadn't been for Tai Jai's desperate will to survive, using the last of her power to shield him from the crushing tides of time, Matthew would never have made it into this world alive. Now, though Matthew was still suffering greatly, the time power within his soul protected him from harm. As long as Matthew remained resolute, he would only experience the pain of time's passage. But Tai Jai wasn't so fortunate. Once again, Matthew pulled her out from the depths of his soul. Under her terrified gaze, Matthew withdrew the time power that had enveloped her. Before Tai Jai could lunge at Matthew and burrow back into his soul, her remaining fragments were immobilized by the immense force of the river of time. Then, without mercy, time itself ripped Tai Jai apart, tearing her into pieces. "No," the echo of her beastly roar became Tai Jai's final words. Watching as Tai Jai was obliterated, Matthew, enduring the agonizing pain, slowly reached out. He grasped the last remaining thread of her essence and watched it disappear into the river of time. Afterward, an indescribable exhaustion and suffering overwhelmed Matthew. He barely had enough strength to grab some paper and scribble down a few instructions, then threw it out of the chamber. Then Matthew slowly closed his eyes. Along with Yaya, whose body was also undergoing changes, they both fell into a deep sleep. On Matthew's smooth forehead, a faint glow appeared, flickering in and out of sight. It was unclear how much time had passed. Matthew regained awareness. He tried to enter a meditative state, but realized that there was nothing around him, not even himself. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared. A bolt of thunder cracked across the heavens, followed by a deafening roll of thunder. Torrential rain fell in torrents, with ripples forming in the water from the splashes. Matthew saw a surge of crimson below. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. Boiling lava spewed forth from the mouth of a volcano. The molten rock rushed with an intense heat from the Earth's core, clashing violently under the sea. As the molten rock was cooled by the water, it turned into cold iron slag. Thick smoke rose, breaking through the water and tearing through its layers, entering the open sky. At some point, Matthew's earlier worries vanished, and he calmly watched the world shift and change. The raging thunder, the surging sea, the billowing black smoke, the unbearable heat. Every moment brought new changes to the world, every second a different view. Time moved ever forward. With a newfound sense of clarity, Matthew began to see more of this barren world's transformations. Some were far beyond his expectations, sparking his amazement. Others confirmed the memories in his mind, bringing a smile to his face. The evolution of all things, the birth and origin of life. The once desolate world slowly filled with vitality, and life blossomed, radiating ever more beautiful light. Matthew slowly opened his eyes. He could now see not just time, but all things in the world. And he could also see himself. Everything was still there. The data display was still functional. His arcanist abilities were unchanged. Only his body had undergone significant changes. He had grown taller, now reaching 9 meters. Though he felt some hunger, his physique was much more imposing. Matthew could feel the immense power hidden within his now stronger body. The power of the candle dragon. Time, and something entirely new on his attribute panel. Name, Matthew Sir Race. Human age, 18 height, 9 meters profession, level 6 arcanist, 0/20, 000. Talent, Candle Dragon Bloodline LV2, all attributes +2, maximum health +10, Master of Time, Reverser of Time. Specializations, Divine Specialization Power of Fate LV1, 0/10, 000. Passive, Insight into the Essence of All Things, presented in a data display. Active, Consume Fate Power to view Fate's branches. Fate Power 1/600. Every time you save or kill someone, you gain corresponding fate power. The world is ever-changing, and change is fate. Note, the fate power of an ordinary person is 1. Low-tier professionals have a fate power of 10 times their class level. Mid-tier professionals have a fate power of 100 times their class level. High-tier professionals have a fate power of 1,000 times their class level. Extraordinary, 10,000 times their class level. Legendary, 100,000 times their class level. Advancement, each LV1 advancement requires fate power equivalent to the same level's total fate power times 10. For example, advancing low-tier specializations, skills, bloodlines, or legacies requires the fate power of a low-tier professional of the same level times 10. Extraordinary Specialization Candle Dragon Body LV1, Intelligence +3, Affinity with Fire Elements, Fire Spell Damage taken -10, Fire Spell Damage dealt +10. Spells, Arcanist Legacies, Super Tier Legacy, Flesh Specialization Analysis LV4. Super Tier Legacy, Weave Activated Grant LV1. Attribute Strength, 12 Right Arrow 14, Modifier +2 Dexterity. 14 Right Arrow 16, Modifier +3 Intelligence. 25 Right Arrow 30, Modifier +10, regenerates 3 mana per minute in Meditation Constitution. 15 Right Arrow 17, Modifier +4 Perception. 18 Right Arrow 20, Modifier +5 Charisma. 16 Right Arrow 18. Modifier +4 Luck. 1 Right Arrow 2 Spell Attack 10. Spell Defense 4 Physical Attack 3. Defense 4. Health 40 +10 +6/56. Constitution ×2 + class level. Light Injury. Mana 300 +60/360. Intelligence ×10 + class level ×10. Abilities Knowledge 198 Right Arrow 225 Legendary. Meditation 158 Right Arrow 185 Quasi-Legendary. Magic Item Crafting 122 Right Arrow 125 High Tier. Alchemy 99 right arrow 105 high tier. Perception 106 right arrow 148 high tier. Deception 105 right arrow 115 high tier. Leadership 101 right arrow 105 high tier. Evasion 86 right arrow 105 high tier. Persuasion 75 right arrow 95 mid tier. Life bond time dragon. Evaluation rapidly developing boss. The biggest change on the attribute panel was that his legendary specialization Fate's Choice had evolved into a divine specialization power of Fate. Experience points, skill points, and Fate coins had all been unified. Matthew understood clearly that Tai Jai had used the fundamental similarity between the three energies to secretly siphon off Fate power, growing stronger in secret. Now the Fate power was his. He discovered that nearly all his abilities, including the divine specialization itself, could be enhanced with Fate power. As Matthew read to the end of the panel, he froze for a moment, a smile on his face. Time Dragon. Yaya was no longer just a dragon beast. She had become a true dragon. Chapter 164. Chosen True Dragon. Chapter 164. Chosen True Dragon. Instinctively opening his eyes, Matthew found himself staring into Yaya's bright blue eyes. The little one was lying in his arms, giggling gleefully. She had transformed into a small girl about 3 to 4 years old, delicate and exquisitely carved like jade. Gurgle, oh no, my belly isn't listening to me. Her soft, white face was full of confusion about being hungry. She tilted her little head, her smooth hair gently falling as she snuggled closer, her pure, unblemished eyes reflecting Matthew's face. Matthew was instantly charmed, completely captivated by her. Chuckling happily, Matthew lifted Yaya and placed her on his shoulder, holding her tiny hand as he smiled and said, "If you give it something delicious, it'll listen to you." Yaya tilted her head in realization, nodding with newfound understanding. She thought of all kinds of food, her mouth watering at the thought. Her body had grown larger, and her clothes seemed to have shrunk. Matthew sent a message spell to Butler Ralph while glancing at Yaya's attribute panel. Name, Yaya. Race, Time Dragon. Profession, Level 1 Right Arrow 2 Arcanist. Age, 3 months. Hatchling Phase. Talent, True Dragon. Bloodline LV2 Right Arrow LV3. All attributes +2 Right Arrow +4. Mastery of Bloodline Powers. Understanding of Polymorph Spell. Challenge Level 12+. Right Arrow 15+. Equipment, Shadowfang Specializations. Extraordinary Specialization Dragon's Might LV2 Right Arrow LV3. Extraordinary Specialization Exile Breath LV2 Right Arrow LV3. Extraordinary Specialization True Dragon Body LV1 Right Arrow LV2. Advanced Specialization Quick Spellcasting LV1. Advanced Specialization Mana Drain LV1. Skills 0 level spells. Light Spell LV2 Minor Repair LV2 Cleanse LV2 1 level spells. Magic Missile LV4, Sleep Spell LV4, Grease Spell LV2, Weakness Spell LV2, Special Spell, Mirror Image. Abilities, Meditation, 80 Right Arrow 105, Knowledge 80 Right Arrow 95, Perception 80 Right Arrow 85, Evasion 50 Right Arrow 75, Flight 60 Right Arrow 105. Attribute Strength, 15 Right Arrow 17, Modifier +4 Dexterity, 17 Right Arrow 20, Modifier +5 Intelligence, 21 Right Arrow 23, Modifier +7 Constitution. 18 Right Arrow 20 Modifier +5 Perception, 22 Right Arrow 23 Modifier +7 Charisma, 24 Right Arrow 25 Modifier +7 Luck, +5. Physical Attack 4 + 7 = 11 Spell Attack, 7 + 4 = 11 Physical Defense, 5 + 6 = 11 Spell Defense, 5 + 8 = 13 Health, 40 + 20 + 20/80 Mana, 230 + 20/250 Evaluation, Chosen True Dragon. Whoa, I didn't expect Yaya to fully evolve into a true dragon after absorbing most of the Fate power. Her challenge level is now 15+. No need to worry about handling most extraordinary professionals. Her stats are over the top, she's stronger than most young dragons. Yaya's bloodline is full of surprises, she's always capable of giving me pleasant shocks. Haha. With Polymorph at her disposal, hiding her presence will be much easier. Matthew's mind was filled with joyous thoughts as he envisioned Yaya pulling off surprise attacks in all kinds of tactical scenarios. The image was simply too good. Outside the manor, Butler Ralph's face was calm, but his heart grew heavier with worry. He was reviewing the intelligence reports he had received, his eyes filled with a cold fury. But he held it in, not letting it show. He simply took stock of the supplies being delivered and ordered them to be stored away. Nearby, Angela took the reports and couldn't help but curse softly. These sewer-dwelling slimes, do they really think we're afraid to act? Ralph shook his head slowly, looking at the newly refurbished Bay town, suppressing his anger as he continued calmly, don't act impulsively. As long as we don't strike first, they can't touch us. Wait until the Lord leaves the lab, and then we'll decide. As the two discussed how to deal with the increasingly aggressive enemies, a heated argument suddenly broke out on a distant street. Angela's expression changed, and she immediately led the soldiers to intervene. The commotion was quickly quelled, the troublemakers arrested, and everything seemed to return to its usual calm. Ralph watched this scene with clear eyes, knowing full well that it was a deliberate test. A few disgruntled patrolling soldiers passed by Ralph, muttering under their breath. Their discontented conversation drifted into his ears. These damn adventurers are getting more and more unruly. Yeah, now they've even dared to cause trouble in town. We need to teach them a harsh lesson. Some adventurers aren't following orders, causing damage instead of completing their tasks. I don't know what's going on in their heads. What else? You've been treating them too well in Baytown. Some people you give them an inch and they take a mile. Ralph pretended not to hear any of it, firmly remembering the Lord's orders. As long as the army finances and food supplies are in check, the territory won't fall into chaos. Despite the adventurers' antics, Ralph knew that once the Lord returned, he could easily clear them out. But for the sake of the Lord's plans, Ralph chose to remain patient. Just as Ralph was about to head back to the adventurers' hall to inspect and give orders, a communication spell reached him, and his usual stoic expression broke into one of joy. Quickly regaining his composure, Ralph turned to his personal guards and instructed them to continue with their tasks as he proceeded to the adventurers' hall. He was determined to gather the information and show these fools the consequences of their actions. Shortly after, several newly recruited maids brought fresh clothes and food to Matthew's bedroom. Matthew emerged from the chamber, accompanied by a ravenous Yaya, and they both began devouring the food. Delicious. Wow, I've never tasted this before. Wow, this is so flavorful. Hee, I want more. Despite Yaya's small size, her appetite seemed bottomless. Several large plates of food were gone in no time. Luckily, more food was soon brought in, and Matthew was pleasantly surprised by the variety of dishes. He bit into a slice of pork belly, the balance of fat and lean perfect, and swallowed it after a few chews. Matthew, feeling the hunger in his stomach, found himself enjoying his meal immensely. He had already eaten 3 pounds of meat, along with various magical foods like konjac, yet he still felt hungry. He handed Yaya a chicken leg. The little girl eagerly accepted it with her tiny hands, swiftly finishing the braised meat in her mouth. She bit into the tender chicken leg, and with a quick pull, left only a clean bone. Yaya's face was covered in grease, but she didn't care about appearances. Her mind was entirely focused on the feast before her. Matthew carved a slice of roasted lamb, cutting through the fragrant, crispy skin, then wrapped it in a piece of dough with some green onions and took a bite. He handed the rest to Yaya. The little one climbed onto a stool, her hands working furiously, one hand tearing the meat, the other stuffing the onions into her mouth, her cheeks bulging with food. Savoring every bite was a pleasure, but devouring it all was equally satisfying. Burps with her belly full, Yaya rubbed her round tummy with her left hand and let out a comfortable burp. She giggled with her crescent moon-shaped eyes, happily swinging her legs, while her small hands continued to munch on fried beans. Waking up just to eat. Life was good. Subscribe and vote for more chapters. Chapter 165. There are always troublesome people. Chapter 165. There are always troublesome people feeling the enhanced body digesting food at an incredible speed, converting it rapidly into energy that surged through his limbs and bones. Matthew had to admit, the abilities of a pure human body alone would struggle to achieve this effect. Matthew didn't know what methods his mother and the Sir family had used, or how much they had spent to create a genius like him. But one thing was certain, the ability to manipulate bloodline power had existed for a long time. And it had significantly contributed to the growth and development of humanity. It's quite similar to my idea of promoting specializations and training skills. However, they did it for the sake of the family and legacy. Matthew did it to accumulate power to the fullest extent. Time waits for no one. After satisfying his hunger, Matthew placed the bean-munching Yaya on his shoulder and quickly sorted out his thoughts. He reviewed all the plans and arrangements he had made since coming to Bay territory, comparing them to his thoughts and intentions. Soon, Matthew found several discrepancies and issues. There were problems with the military arrangements. The selection of soldiers had been carefully handled, but the training and ideological education of the soldiers had remained superficial, never digging deeper. Even though what Matthew had done far surpassed other lords and factions, it still wasn't in line with his expectations. He had seen invincible armies and witnessed the decline of forces that had once been unstoppable, but became complacent and decayed over time. There were many strategies he hadn't implemented yet. It had to be the influence of Tai Jai. The goddess only cared about soldiers killing or being killed in greater numbers, as quickly as possible. There were significant issues with the civil arrangements. Too much freedom. The household registration system had only been touched upon briefly, without deeper statistics and investigation, leaving room for cultists and spies. In this world full of dangerous cults and powerful individuals, life was certainly more important than freedom. Tai-Jai was too impatient and didn't want to see more people living good lives. After all, hardship was part of fate. The constant changes of life and death were much more beloved by Tai-Jai than peace. This allowed her to quickly plunder more of the power of fate. Economically, there weren't any major issues at the moment. Matthew had no objection to planned economies. As long as everyone had enough resources compared to their previous lives, they would naturally understand. However, there was a significant issue with internal affairs. Matthew thought it was inexcusable that he hadn't noticed earlier. There was no efficient internal governance system in place. Although Butler Ralph, loyal as ever, handled almost everything in the territory by himself, Matthew hadn't appointed more specialized managers to handle tasks more efficiently. Nor had he established detailed, specific tasks for these tools. There was no proper distribution of power among the higher ranks. In simpler terms, there were no clear rules or laws. Nor were there people to enforce those laws. Matthew understood why Tai-Jai had overlooked these things. Gods, let alone lords, nobles, spellcasters, or professionals, often didn't care about ordinary people. They wouldn't concern themselves with the petty rights of people they considered to be like ants. But Matthew understood it very clearly. True civilization, real laws, must apply to every individual. Everyone must follow them. No one should have special privileges. It would be incredibly difficult, but Matthew felt it was worth attempting. Imagine Matthew, with his advanced memory and legacy, came to this world only to behave like everyone else, oppressing, exploiting, and indulging in arrogance. How would that make him different from the high and mighty gods? Of course, Matthew also understood something very well. There are always troublesome people in this world, no matter which world you're in. People who only seek to oppress and exploit others for their own gain are far too numerous to count. Matthew suspected that during his time in seclusion in the chamber, many conflicts must have erupted in Bay territory, some due to human error, but most certainly due to intentional malice. During this time, Matthew decided to plan things carefully. The sun hung low in the sky, and the clouds spread lazily. A gentle breeze blew, causing the rice shoots in the flooded fields and the green leaves of the wheat in the drylands to sway. Long lines of pioneers orderly returned to Bay Town, their eyes filled with eager anticipation as they gazed at the lush green sprouts in the fields. 2 newly added patrol teams were preparing to leave the town to patrol the outer areas. They would clear out the restless murlocs, capture suspicious spies, and stay vigilant for potential enemies. The Murloc camp's recent unrest had made everyone appreciate the peace of Bay territory even more. The reinforced gates, now equipped with a few extra clay golems, quickly quelled the restlessness among the adventurers. But behind the scenes, some people were secretly pleased. Didn't this mean that those in charge of the territory were beginning to acknowledge that they couldn't control the situation? Their opportunity was coming. Beneath the calm surface, turbulent undercurrents began to stir. The Lord's Manor. Almost everyone in charge had gathered here. They thought Butler Ralph had summoned them to discuss countermeasures. But when the now taller lord walked out of the study with a smile, each person's face lit up with unexpected joy. It wasn't until they had lost him that they realized how much they relied on him. Without the Lord overseeing everything, everyone had felt uneasy. Now, seeing the Lord present, exuding even stronger power and making no effort to hide his strength, everyone's hearts were immediately at ease. With the Lord or Arcanist around, no monsters or spirits would stand a chance. However, when everyone noticed the small figure on Matthew's shoulder, they were baffled. They certainly didn't believe this was the Lord's daughter. Because with just one glance at Yaya, everyone could sense a familiar presence. Their minds would instantly conjure up the image of a majestic and beautiful figure. Lord Yaya. Lord Yaya can transform into human form now. This means her power has grown again. In the minds of most commoners and professionals, the more mysterious and unique a creature was, the more powerful it became. Letting the little foodie sit on his shoulder, Matthew carefully reviewed the reports handed to him by Butler Ralph, casually remarking with interest. So I slept for an entire month. Tusk, Bay territory remained fine, but the Murloc camp has been quite active. Having confirmed that the Lord's physical changes were harmless, Butler Ralph felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he thought of those despicable individuals and replied helplessly, "Their numbers aren't small, and they have noble backers. Without your orders, Lord, we couldn't take action." Matthew understood Butler Ralph's implication and stretched lazily, his voice clear and bright as he said, "Don't worry about the Murloc camp. Let them stir up trouble for a while longer. We'll deal with them once the fortress is fully built. Bay territory is our foundation. The problems here are more pressing. If some people don't want to behave, then we'll teach them the rules. Perfect timing. Let's make an example out of them for the adventurers to see. Chapter 166. The Big Ambition Meeting. Chapter 166. The Big Ambition Meeting. Since we started developing Bay territory, we haven't had a formal meeting yet. Today is the perfect time, with everyone gathered here, to discuss the plans for the future. Let's also talk about the current situation of our territory and see what prospects we have for development. We need to make sure everyone sees hope so that they'll be willing to invest more effort. After Matthew said this, everyone turned to him, savoring the meaning of his words and feeling a surge of joy in their hearts. The meaning behind the Lord's words was clear. Everyone had gained his trust, which meant not only could they keep their current positions, but they also had opportunities for further advancement in the future. Butler Ralph, well prepared, handed out the compiled documents to everyone present. Everyone, take a good look. The development of the territory concerns each of you and affects everyone within it. Meeting everyone's gaze, Matthew returned their looks calmly. In reality, he was examining their attribute panels and identities, ensuring there were no spies from other factions among them. While you shouldn't go around harming others, you should always guard against potential threats. Perhaps due to the increased responsibilities and greater pressure, Ralph had now become a level 6 butler. Such an interesting profession intrigued Matthew greatly. After all, if he could figure out this secret, could he also create specialized management professions or certain specific abilities? In charge of the livestock sector was Ms. Tana, a former barbarian slave. Compared to when she had been cautious and timid, she could now meet Matthew's gaze directly. Seeing her as a level 13 shaman, Matthew thought he might collect more information in the future. Captain Sean, responsible for clearing and patrolling, had also improved significantly, now reaching level 5 warrior. It was clear that besides working, he had spent considerable effort training. Angela, in charge of the military, looked at Matthew with steadfast and passionate eyes. Matthew was pleasantly surprised to see that she had grown into a level 5 knight. It was hard to imagine the effort she must have put in behind the scenes. Training instructor Arnold now smiled more, seeming much more relaxed than he had been a month or two ago. His strength had not diminished, remaining a level 13 warrior. Combat Commander Old John had also become a level 5 warrior. Although his combat strength wasn't outstanding, his experience in commanding troops had grown more seasoned and skilled. His advancement in the mid-tier specialty of command proficiency was proof of that. Old John even brought along 2 people, seemingly preparing to mentor them intensively. The first was level 2 wanderer, Jai Fan. Matthew had read his file and noted that he had good talent as a professional, and his command skills were improving rapidly. Jai Fan had become the captain of a squad of 50 soldiers. Then there was someone Matthew found particularly interesting, the half-demon swordswoman, Elio. After restoring her beautiful appearance, Elio had grown to become an 8th-level swordswoman in just a month. Matthew vaguely remembered that he still owed her an enchanted longsword. Since they couldn't purchase a medium-sized teleportation array, Adam Smith had acquired several small teleportation arrays for transporting key personnel, intelligence, and resources between different locations. Elderfield and Beelzebub, stationed at the Murloc camp, and Adam Smith, far away in Blood Moon City, Leon, managing the logging camp in the Dark Forest and the camp in Troll Valley, all had returned using these teleportation arrays. Each of their abilities had improved to varying degrees. Elderfield had already become a level 9 hunter. Beelzebub had gradually mastered his frost giant bloodline, advancing to a level 12 warrior. Even Adam Smith had risen to become a level 4 bard. Most notably, Leon, with the greatest potential, had already reached level 5 warrior. His once youthful face had become mature and confident, with an air of self-assurance. This made Matthew quite reflective. Indeed, combat and experience were the best ways to grow. As long as Leon was placed in the right environment, his growth would not be slow. Matthew had already made up his mind to put more responsibility on Leon's shoulders. Everyone who Matthew had scrutinized felt a strange sense of unease, as if the Lord had seen right through them. But soon their attention was drawn to the booklets in their hands. With each new piece of data they read, their eyes widened with growing astonishment. Butler Ralph observed their changing expressions, feeling immense pride and respect for the Lord as he confidently announced, Bay Territory now has a population of 27,583, growing by 3,500 people each week. Approaching a population of 30,000 was beyond what anyone had expected. Additionally, we have 10,000 kobolds, increasing by 500 each week. 1,600 troll captives, increasing by 100 weekly. 20,000 murlocs, increasing by 1,000 weekly. We've cleared 47,000 acres of land. The rate of clearing is 1 acre per 10 people daily, with 10,000 people currently involved. We have 1,500 people in livestock farming, raising 75,000 chickens, 30,000 ducks, 7,500 geese, 15,000 pigs, 7,500 cows, and 1,500 horses, with a 50% increase expected by month's end. We have 45 factories, including an armaments factory, 1,000 people, steel mill, 500 people, clothing factory, 1,000 people, lumber mill, 1,000 people, slaughterhouse, 500 people, food processing factory, 1,000 people, and an herb factory, 500 people, among others. We can produce all necessary daily items, and our stored goods are enough to supply 100,000 people for 2 years. Additionally, the Murloc camp and Troll camp will gradually provide us with more resources and profits. In the future, as Butler Ralph grew more excited, so did everyone present. If they could continue developing at this pace, Baytown could easily become a city with over 100,000 people by the end of the year. By that time, according to the Netheral Empire's Frontier Expansion Act, the Lord would automatically rise to the rank of third-class Baron, with the power to grant knighthood titles to others. Everyone would have a bright future ahead. Butler Ralph, reaching this point in his speech, added, "Everyone's efforts will be rewarded, and the Lord has decided that as long as you complete the designated tasks, each of you will receive 500 gold coins per month as a reward. 500 gold coins. That was a considerable sum. Who would complain about having too much money? But it wasn't just about the money. Watching all this unfold, a faint smile appeared on Matthew's face. If you want the tools to work well, you have to make sure everyone is well fed. First, then you draw even bigger ambitions for them to strive toward, so they have motivation and drive to work harder. One side may squeeze them, but the other has to dangle the carrot and make them run faster. After all, even ogres know how to slack off if they aren't properly incentivized. Everyone needs something to look forward to. Chapter 167, People are unreliable. I won't use people anymore. Chapter 167, People are unreliable. I won't use people anymore. After painting big ambitions for everyone, they all left full of confidence. Matthew specifically kept Butler Ralph for a moment, learning from him the details about the adventurers in Bay territory, then calmly said, "No worries, tomorrow everything will be resolved." Butler Ralph maintained full confidence in the Lord. Little did he expect the method Matthew would use to resolve it. In the study, Matthew hummed a little tune as he picked out new clothes. Using Mage Hand, he lifted a robe embroidered with the Arcanist insignia, standing still as it dressed him. The hard-working Mage Hand then deftly removed his customized fabric armor and wrapped him in the robe. It layered on a small vest embroidered with the Sir family crest, finally covering it all with a shadowy cloak. Matthew couldn't help but give the handsome man in the mirror a perfect score. Glancing at Yaya standing before the mirror, who was happily admiring her new dress, Matthew scooped her up and placed her on his shoulder, smiling as he asked, "Do you like it? Should I get you a few more outfits?" The cute little one eagerly nodded and started counting on her fingers, planning how many she would need. Yesterday's gone like the eastern flow, never to return. Humming his tune, Matthew pushed open the door to the laboratory. Waiting patiently, Mountain silently watched him approach, greeting him as always. "Welcome back to the laboratory, Master. What a wonderful worker." Patting Mountain on the shoulder, Matthew once again appreciated the benefits of being tall, and as he looked over the neatly arranged blood-replenishing potions, he sincerely remarked, "You've worked hard these past days. It's no hardship, it's what I should do." Mountain's deep voice carried a calm and peaceful tone, as if he had grown accustomed to this routine long ago. But Matthew didn't quite see it that way, carefully inspecting the production tools before snapping his fingers lightly. "Hold on for 10 more days. After I resolve the territory issues, I'll come back to upgrade this place. Also, we need to discuss your growth path properly. Your achievements haven't been revealed yet, but your contributions won't go unnoticed. In these days, think carefully about what kind of advanced golem you want to become. I'm seeking your input on this." Mountain silently regarded Matthew, as if digesting the words or perhaps already beginning to contemplate them. Matthew gave Mountain a thoughtful look, a calm smile on his face, and turned towards his experiment area. "They may look like lovebirds and butterflies, but this isn't the right era for that." Yaya curiously observed Matthew busily working, her large eyes brimming with a desire to learn as she eagerly watched, hoping to pick up some knowledge. Matthew took out a pile of clay, his mind envisioning the magical structure of a clay golem, focusing on its core and silently reflecting. Not every one of them needs to be like Mountain. Using self-aware units here would be a waste. Moreover, we must consider mass production suitability, along with future modifications and upgrades. Size doesn't matter. What's key is that it aids production and can scale effectively. Let's create a few prototypes. If they work well, we can record the entire production process. Not too many for now. After Mountain's abilities are upgraded, he can handle the task of scaling production. With a few quick thoughts, Matthew made up his mind and decisively began his work. The process of creating ordinary clay golems was already second nature to him. Now, with his enhanced ability to display data, everything was completely under his control. The creation of a clay golem, from shaping the clay to constructing the mana models and magical circuits. Then came the installation of an earth elemental crystal as the core. Lastly came the fine-tuning of the golem's overall structure and the activation of its core. Each step was adjusted carefully by Matthew, ensuring perfection at every turn. Within roughly 3 minutes, a clay golem about 7 meters tall was fully crafted. In terms of size, Matthew had engaged in some cost-cutting. Its exterior was rather simple, with the most complex feature being the Bay Territory dragon crest. But for its golem core, Matthew had put in significant effort. A first-level spell, Detect Lies, its internal structure isn't overly complicated, but if I want it to be permanently enchanted and maintain simpler recharging, I need to modify the mana pathways. Then, by linking the spell activation to the golem's control core, it gains the ability to cast spells, though each clay golem's mana is limited. It can self-replenish in environments rich with earth elements. Compared to consuming a spellcaster's time and spell slots, it's far more cost-effective. This one is still too large, though. Its self-sustainability and absorption rates are a bit wasteful. Size is important. I need to find the optimal balance, which requires more trials and adjustments. Matthew's clear voice filled the room as he adjusted the internal structure of the clay golem, explaining each step to Yaya. Having completed a day's tasks, Mountain silently stood by, watching. This somewhat taciturn figure had been called over by Yaya. Yaya wasn't just cute, she was incredibly smart too. With knowledge and intelligence improving together, Matthew had become increasingly adept at constructing arcane models and magical pathways. He even started to implement some creative ideas, incorporating simple yet effective response programs into the golem cores. Initially, the golem might have seemed dull, but after Yaya tried speaking with the clay golem a couple of times, her curiosity quickly grew. After all, most intelligent beings have a desire to create and a sense of wonder. Watching a lifelike entity gradually form before her eyes, Yaya naturally became more interested. Without hesitation, Yaya eagerly began working on creating her own clay golem. Matthew swiftly delegated the teaching to Mountain. As long as Mountain repeatedly created semi-finished golems, Matthew could handle the final core adjustments himself. As the number of clay golems steadily increased, they gradually approached Matthew's ideal form. Having sorted out the clay golems, Matthew shifted his focus to another type of golem. The mid-tier golem, rock golem. Upgrading and enhancing Mountain would be a more significant project, so naturally, Matthew needed some practice first. A faint smile appeared on Matthew's face as he contemplated this. The simplest way to reduce crime is to improve the environment, establish a solid system, and raise the cost and difficulty of committing crimes. Eventually, crime rates will drop naturally. I've given them chances. Now it's up to them to make the best of it. People are easily bought. Systems tend to become corrupt. There will always be those who seek to exploit loopholes. There will always be troublemakers. So I'll simply stop using people. Chapter 168, Heavy-Handed Strikes. Chapter 168, Heavy-Handed Strikes. The next day, dawn had just pierced through the darkness. The light of day slowly grew, as bright sunlight began to gently pour down. In Baytown, still bathed in shadows, new and peculiar figures appeared at the gates and in the center of several streets. Early risers immediately noticed their presence. Standing at normal human height, their chests bore the Baytown crest on their robes. The square-shaped chest robes displayed several lines of text. Patrol Golem automatically handles disputes, arguments, and disorderly conduct, reports household registry numbers, can answer inquiries about residents, laws, destination points, shops, and products. At the command of patrol soldiers, releases the Detect Lies spell. Violators will be charged 30 copper coins for each spell cast. Vandalism or graffiti will result in a deduction of 50 contribution points and a fine of 20 silver coins. Most people were curious about them. Some tried asking them questions, but the patrol golems did not respond. Many began mocking them, but soon they were left speechless. 2 soldiers approached and in front of everyone spoke to the patrol golem. Patrol guard no. 132 posing a question. Patrol golem no. 6 responding to your query. How do I get to the east gate? Proceed straight along street no. 6 to the intersection with street no. 4 turn right at the crossroads. Proceed to the far end of street no. 4 and follow the wall left for 200 meters to reach the east gate. What is the punishment for insulting someone? A fine of 50 copper coins and 3 days of street cleaning. For fighting. Now, everyone quickly understood the significance of these unique clay golems, and some grew eager to test them out. The patrol soldiers smiled and encouraged people to try, though at first they hesitated. However, after repeated attempts that yielded accurate answers, people quickly became bolder. But the patrol soldiers soon informed them that each person was only allowed to ask 3 questions per day, so they shouldn't waste them. The patrol golems stationed at every street corner drew large crowds as people watched and studied them. On their way to work, they engaged in lively discussions about the golems. Aside from the patrol golems, there were also several large, towering rock golems stationed at the town gates and the adventurers' hall. Written in bold letters on the chests of these mighty rock golems were descriptions that piqued the curiosity and amazement of many adventurers. Detection golem. Automatically releases detect lies for verifying and issuing tasks. Reports adventurer numbers, can recommend tasks, settle tasks, and distribute bounties. At the command of patrol soldiers. Can enter combat mode. Any vandalism or destruction of these golems will result in imprisonment for no less than 6 months, and no less than 3 years of hard labor. Guardian golem. Automatically releases detect weapons and detect lies for security and registration. Reports adventurer numbers, can register entries into town and store weapons. At the command of the captain of the guard, can enter combat mode. Any escape, resistance, or assault will result in the loss of all contribution points, with a minimum of 5 years imprisonment and 10 years of hard labor. Long-term bounty mission. Confirming and reporting any spies will earn 50 contribution points and a gold coin reward per spy. The gathered adventurers looked at the towering, 4-meter-tall rock golems, their glowing red eyes radiating power, and no thoughts of rebellion crossed their minds. For most adventurers, Bay Territory's display of power once again left them both satisfied and deeply curious. So this is what the Lord and the Arcanist were working on. Seems like it. These must be rock golems, right? They look incredibly powerful. Yes, they are rock golems, just renamed. I've seen them before in Blood Moon City. I didn't expect the Lord and the Arcanist to have developed rock golems. Baytown's defenses have really leveled up. Ah, I seem to have forgotten my adventurer number. That's impossible. Every adventurer gets a number when they arrive in the territory, and you use it every day for tasks. Where's your adventurer's badge, I think? I lost it, hey. Guard, I think we've got a spy over here. He's trying to run. Hurry, boom, the rock golem, which had been standing still, suddenly sprang into action at the word spy. It raised its massive foot and slammed it into the ground, sending a shockwave rippling forward. The fleeing spy hadn't even realized what was happening before the shockwave knocked him down, and a large hand rose from the ground to grasp him tightly. The entire process took only 3 or 4 breaths, and many of the surrounding adventurers hadn't even processed what was happening before the fight was over. Quick reacting guards were already approaching the captured spy, firmly bound in the golem's grip. The leading guard captain sternly asked, "Are you a spy?" The adventurer, pale-faced, shook his head vehemently. There was no way he could admit that. Unfortunately, denial was futile. Detecting lies, the golem's deep voice echoed, and the surrounding adventurers erupted in murmurs of awe as they marveled at this clumsy spy. Spy confirmed. Adventurer no. 1672, you are awarded 50 contribution points and a 50 gold coin bounty. After stating this, the imposing rock golem returned to its position. Now every adventurer's eyes lit up. Especially the one who had half-jokingly reported the spy, now laughing with glee. It's like gold just fell from the sky. Many adventurers glanced enviously at him. Others, with sharper instincts, began eyeing those around them, assessing who might be suspicious. Meanwhile, having witnessed the rock golem's formidable combat prowess, many adventurers suddenly became much more obedient. No one wanted to be on the receiving end of a punch from those giant fists. Even those adventurers harboring ill intentions now felt their minds going blank. Cautiously eyeing the rock golems, they swiftly abandoned any plans they shouldn't have had. Likewise, Bay Territory's unexpected deployment managed to catch several careless spies. Adventurers who reported or captured spies immediately received their rewards and bounties, with everyone eager to hunt down the next one. Fellow adventurers, instead of feeling any discomfort, were growing more excited. After all, each spy was worth a whopping 50 gold coins. Won't they be upset? Felicity blinked curiously, knowing well that adventurers had no true loyalty or position. It wasn't uncommon for adventurers to become assassins, thieves, or bandits. Many nobles and lords across the Netheril Empire enjoyed using these throwaway adventurers. Whether for open conflict or underhanded schemes, adventurers always had a presence where conflict thrived. In fact, adventurers weren't particularly well regarded by most of Netheril's upper society. Over time, adventurers had learned to embrace it, living for gold, moving from place to place. If a location became unwelcoming, many adventurers would simply pack up and leave in droves. Haha, the Lord put so much effort into drawing these adventurers here for one reason, to make them work for us. If they can't do that, they're better off leaving. There's no shortage of adventurers willing to come here. After all, where else can they earn as much as they do here in Bay territory? Fully dedicated to the territory, Leo had a clear understanding of adventurers. People die for money and birds die for food. Adventurers, there's no escaping that fact. Announcement: a big thank you to Kill Jason for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me. Chapter 169. Immediate results. Chapter 169. Immediate results. The people of Baytown had mixed feelings about the introduction of the golems. However, soon enough, their constant work left little room for other thoughts, and they became more focused on their jobs. Many even felt reassured by the attention of their lord, which gave them a sense of security. After all, when these towering figures stood along the riverbanks and at the edges of farmland, the feeling of protection was overwhelming. What they didn't know was that, aside from a few key clay golems, the rest were essentially for show. Matthew couldn't afford the maintenance and upkeep of so many clay golems, so he resorted to some clever tricks. After all, the real combat force for the territory wasn't these clay golems. The morale of the people settled, ensuring work efficiency. The feedback from the data naturally pleased Steward Ralph. In the camp of the Dark Forest. The camp was usually patrolled by soldiers. After over a month of training, these soldiers were nothing like before. With the addition of nutritious food and magical supplements, they had all become professionals, each learning at least one specialization. They had absorbed valuable combat experience, and their demeanor now carried a sense of strength. But even with such progress, there were still troublemakers stirring things up. Motivated by various reasons, these individuals caused disruptions in the Dark Forest area under Bay Territory's control. In certain resource collection areas, they would sabotage and steal from resource sites. Some went even further, attacking other adventurers and robbing them of their belongings. Afterward, they would complete another simple task or report failure, pretending nothing had happened. Some adventurers thought direct action was too risky. Instead, they spread rumors during discussions, maliciously questioning and criticizing Bay Territory's policies. Although these troublemakers were few in number, the damage they caused was significant. After all, while making money was important, so was staying alive. Over the past couple of weeks, Leon had been tempted to intervene but held back. After all, destruction is much easier than construction. If Leon's guard units suffered losses, the hard-won Troll Valley camp might be destroyed. The ever-watchful trolls certainly wouldn't let Bay Territory have a second chance to rebuild. Until now, several rock golems had been transported over. Leon positioned them at the camp gates by evening. With rock golems complementing elite soldiers, the camp's defenses grew significantly stronger, and so did Leon's control. More importantly, the modified rock golems took over the tasks of verifying missions and monitoring adventurers. The clever Leon waited until the adventurers returned to camp unsuspectingly after their misdeeds, before subjecting them to detect lies. The careless adventurer spies and thieves were caught red-handed. Did you violate Bay Territory's laws, adventurer regulations, or code of conduct? With just this one question, Leon and his soldiers managed to capture over 20 adventurers. Most of the adventurers obediently surrendered. Of course, some refused to believe it, and when detected by detect lies, attempted to flee or resist using their own strength. Leon had no intention of showing mercy to such adventurers. The rock golems took swift action, trapping them in earth element cages to slow them down. Then a barrage of heavy crossbow bolts rained down on them. Even high-level professionals, caught off guard, were either killed or severely injured. These reckless adventurers were instantly turned into pincushions. Leon, who had taken decisive action, hung their bodies up and publicly announced their crimes to all nearby adventurers. The now much improved Leon also didn't forget to read aloud the warnings he had received from Steward Ralph. We welcome all law-abiding adventurers. Bay Territory offers everyone a comfortable environment for adventure and growth, but for those harboring malicious intentions, we'll kill each and everyone without mercy. Additionally, we will never secretly dispose of captured adventurers. Their crimes will be publicly listed, and they will be punished and dealt with in accordance with laws, regulations, and codes of conduct. The territory will also issue a long-term bounty missy for every piece of information provided that leads to the identification of an adventurer who violated the rules. After verification, a reward will be issued based on the severity of their crime. Furthermore, adventurers who attempt to sabotage the territory's wealth, kill other adventurers without cause, or harbor hostility towards the territory, for each such person reported or captured, a reward of 20 to 100 gold coins will be issued. for each one killed after verification. A reward of 50 gold coins per person. These orders were promptly engraved on the chests of the rock golems and placed throughout the camp. The adventurers who had been subjected to this heavy-handed crackdown briefly sulked but soon grew excited again. They weren't fools. If they were, they wouldn't have survived this long. Good riddance. I've had enough of those fools, agreed. Bay Territory is a prime adventuring spot, and the Lord is such a generous benefactor. We should all support him. Those troublemakers deserved it. Think about it. If something happens to Bay Territory and the Lord suffers heavy losses, he might stop trusting us adventurers. Then where would we be able to make this kind of money? Exactly. As long as we do our job and complete the tasks, we'll earn far more than other territories or lords could offer. We and the Lord, along with Bay Territory, are all in this together. Not to mention how well Bay Territory treats the common people and the professionals who join. With enough contribution points, we can even learn some professional secret techniques, not to mention all the magical gear and items available. No need to say more. I support the Lord and Bay Territory's decisions. For these scum, I'll capture them one by one. Hey, if you catch them all, what'll be left for us to claim as bounty? Ha ha ha. Seeing the adventurer problem finally resolved, Leon exhaled deeply in relief. He held a deep respect for the Lord's ability to swiftly and decisively handle any issue. His mind wandered back to the private words the Lord had shared with him upon his return to Troll Valley Camp. Your potential is promising, and your growth is commendable, but never let it make you arrogant. Sending you to train in the Dark Forest serves two purposes: to strengthen your power and to hone your abilities. Never harbor any complaints. If you ever need anything, whether for public or personal reasons, report it to Steward Ralph, and I will decide on the solution. Your responsibilities are heavy. The Lord's solemn words left Leon feeling honored and determined. He secretly vowed never to let the Lord down. Yes, the loyalty of his tools had been firmly secured. Chapter 170. Inspection Squad. Chapter 170. Inspection Squad. That night, many of the captured adventurers, assassins, and spies were specially transported back to Bay Territory. The experienced old John personally interrogated them thoroughly this time. With Matthew's full support, these adventurers, who hadn't been given much importance, quickly spilled everything they knew. Elio, observing from the side, looked conflicted. When old John washed his hands and came out, she hesitantly asked, "If they truly intend to make a move against us, will Lord Matthew declare war?" War, a terrifying word. Thinking about the family she fled from, Elio fell silent. Old John, with a cold smirk and full confidence, replied with the words Lord Matthew often used, "If they dare to act, we might even have to give them some credit. But using such disgusting tricks, there's no way they'll start a full-blown conflict. According to the rules of the Netheril Empire, nobles can't fight one another directly unless two great families are willing to fight to the death. Just report this intelligence to Lord Matthew. He'll make the final decision. We can't decide for him." Nearby, Feli blinked and couldn't bear to look at the screaming fools being interrogated. She was about to comfort Elio, but noticed that Elio's face had grown determined. "To protect the territory and our home, even if war comes, I won't be afraid." It was only after coming to Bay Territory that Elio truly understood. Fear was useless. Defending your home with like-minded people was the path she sought. The care she received in Bay Territory, the hope for a peaceful and prosperous future, fueled Elio's desire to grow stronger through training. Feli hadn't expected it, but before she could speak, Elio had already broken free of her own mental shackles. "All right, take this information with you, and let's report it to Lord Matthew. We thought we were doing well, but it turns out we missed a lot of issues." Old John gritted his teeth angrily as he said this. His family was on their way to Bay Territory, so his resolve to deal with their enemies was stronger than ever. The two women followed old John into the Lord's manor. They could sense that the captain had brought them along for a specific reason or purpose. Ever since moving in, Matthew hadn't done much to expand or renovate the not-so-spacious Lord's manor. He only used some materials and time to reinforce the outer structure, ensuring that it wouldn't be easily destroyed by something like a fireball spell. Many areas of the manor were equipped with detection, alarm, and trap arrays. The personnel deployment was also crucial. Over 50 heavily armored infantry soldiers and another 50 elite guards patrolled the manor in 3 shifts. Elio observed all of this but didn't sense anything out of place. Feli, however, who was familiar with noble and spellcaster lifestyles, found the modest setup of the manor quite unbelievable. Is Lord Matthew really so indifferent to luxury? Or is he investing all his money into developing the territory and strengthening his power? But even so, this hardly suits his status, right? While Feli was lost in thought, old John suddenly stopped. A squad of heavily armored soldiers approached and checked their identities. This was the 3rd inspection so far. Another thought crossed Feli's mind. Lord Matthew certainly values his safety, I wonder where the Arcanist resides. As she pondered this, a faint odor drifted by. A group of soldiers was transporting more than 50 captured trolls out of the side gate of the manor. Elio and Feli could both sense that these robust, unnaturally healthy trolls seemed a bit off. Sensing their confusion, old John turned slightly and whispered, "See those trolls? They not only train with our soldiers, but also participate in Lord Matthew and the Arcanist's experiments." Arcanist experiments. Such a chilling topic quickly killed their curiosity, and their gazes toward the trolls became more complicated. Upon reaching the meeting room again, Elio and Feli instinctively lightened their steps. The tall lord was facing away from them, working on a clay golem that was a head shorter than him. Old John stood still, seemingly unwilling to disturb Lord Matthew. But Matthew had already sensed their arrival and turned around with a smile. "You've been busy all day. You must be tired. Sit down first and take your time explaining." After Matthew sat down, Old John slowly followed and handed over the parchment containing the intel. "We've confirmed their origins. They come from two main groups. One group is here to gather information. They were sent by the Pfizer Merchant Guild, trying to bribe people and obtain classified information about our territory. The other group comes from Viscount Carlisle of Blood Moon City. The people he sent were here to cause disruption in our territory and sabotage our facilities and factories." As Matthew read through the confessions, he could sense the blood that stained them. Old John clearly worked hard to extract this information. The Pfizer Merchant Guild wasn't an immediate concern. They hadn't taken direct action, and Matthew didn't plan to attack them for now. But as for Viscount Carlisle of Blood Moon City, Matthew was quite familiar. The Carlisle family was one of the three great families of Blood Moon City. They had been around for centuries and gained power by investing in the development of the Blood Moon City ruins. Their influence was vast, with many family members. In fact, Matthew had previously crossed paths with the Carlisle family. The town of Sweetwater, destroyed by the Black Dragon, and the ill-fated Baron Carlisle were both part of the Carlisle family. Clearly, the Carlisle family had their eyes on the ruins. Their reasoning was simple. The ruins lay between Bay Territory and Sweetwater, giving both sides a right to develop the area. Matthew set the documents aside and looked at Elio and Feli, who were still curiously watching the clay golem. A 4th-level ranger, an 8th-level swordswoman. Their potential and combat abilities were sufficient. Not wanting to waste time since he still had work to do modifying the golems, Matthew got straight to the point, to deal with these infiltrating enemies. "I want you two to lead and form an inspection squad. You'll have the freedom to select your own personnel, with a starting number of 100. Your mission is simple but vital. Find the infiltrators. Capture most of them, and monitor the high-value targets while defending the territory together. No tools in this territory would be allowed to slack off. Not a single one. Announcement: a big thank you to Masiko for joining my Patreon. Your support means a lot to me." Chapter 171, High Treatment for Teachers. Chapter 171, High Treatment for Teachers. Hearing this, both women instinctively widened their eyes. Their distinct faces displayed an unexpected charm. They never imagined that the Lord valued them so highly. Even though they hadn't been in the territory for long, they were fully aware that, despite Bay Territory being tucked away in the eastern province, it was far from insignificant. Hidden talents abounded. Just having 2 Arcanists already put them ahead of 90% of the territories in the Netheral Empire. Not to mention the legendary stories of the Lord and the Dragon, which they had personally witnessed. In other territories, unruly and chaotic barbarian slaves defied commands. Yet in Bay Territory, they were unusually obedient, eager to integrate into the community. Some were even personally trained by the Lord and turned into heavily armored infantry, entrusted with guarding the Lord's manor. And there were plenty of talents and professionals drawn by the high rewards. The average age of recruits was getting younger. It was clear that, as Bay Territory's fame grew, more people learned about it, making it increasingly attractive. The Lord's offer to let them freely choose personnel was a sign of enormous trust and delegation of power. However, the two were puzzled by why the Lord trusted them so much. The reason was simple. Since his fate specialization had reached divine rank, Matthew could see more through the data. Elio loyalty 90, Feli loyalty 80. Matthew was curious why their loyalty was so high. Especially in Feli's case, she was the heir to the Lunar Glimmer family, yet she had stayed so obediently in Bay Territory. With Beelzebub's help, she had survived life-or-death crises and endured everything. It made Matthew deeply reflective. It turns out that one's strength is the key. False luck only lasts for a short time. However, the fact that Feli hadn't returned to her family and chose to stay in Bay Territory with such high loyalty left him quite satisfied. Matthew wasn't one to pry. As long as loyalty was guaranteed, he was happy to reward and trust. Some matters were better left untouched. Don't worry. Old John will help you pick people. As long as your reasons are sound, he'll support your decisions. Since you'll be facing additional risks, you'll receive new gear and supplies, along with better treatment. Also, come back tomorrow around this time to receive the weapons I've prepared for you. With just a few words, Matthew dispelled their concerns. Old John understood Matthew's unspoken meaning and took the still stunned women back to the military camp. There, they could access the records of all soldiers and professionals. Matthew was naturally pleased that Leo and Feli had pledged themselves to his service. However, he wouldn't show too much favoritism. He employed the simplest method to manage talent, ensuring their loyalty. Then, through better systems, he motivated them, minimizing the need for excessive management effort and time. This way, he could focus more of his time and energy on enhancing his own strength. Angela's rapid advancement had far exceeded her initial potential, further proving the importance of environment and experience. This reinforced Matthew's determination to train more talents, as having a larger pool of talent would open up more opportunities in the future. Glancing at his status panel, Matthew began calculating the gains and expenditures. The fate energy gathered during my month of sleep was entirely used to repair and reconstruct my soul, but the results were good. I'm currently gaining around 2,000 points of fate energy daily. Just enough to match the number of adventurers. Daily expenses for reconstruction are roughly 1,000 points. The final modifications for the clay golems should take about another week. The next upgrade will require 20,000 points of fate energy. So I'll need to accumulate more steadily. Once the adventurer system stabilizes, it'll be time to start a new round of recruitment, but with ruins of the Merman Castle in play, I won't have to wait long for that opportunity. With these thoughts in mind, Matthew refocused his attention on the clay golems. He still had many ideas to test out, time waited for no one. May 3rd, the scorching sun rose, the heat of summer becoming more apparent. After yesterday's upheaval, the atmosphere in Baytown felt somewhat unusual. Many were either paranoid or curious about the mysterious golems. But their attentions soon shifted when a crowd gathered around the bulletin board at the town gate. As usual, someone stepped forward to explain the latest announcement. From today, Baytown will officially begin construction on a vocational academy, expected to be completed within a month, to better train professionals. We're recruiting teachers skilled in various techniques, knowledge, and specializations. All teachers will be subject to a public examination. Upon passing, they'll become provisional teachers with a monthly salary of 10 gold coins. After 6 months, they'll become full-time teachers, with a salary of 20 gold coins per month. The more professionals they train and the stronger they are, the more rewards they'll earn. Additionally, full-time teachers will receive a permanent residence and 100 acres of land. Note, all teachers must continue learning and growing, with an annual assessment to determine whether their pay will increase or decrease. After hearing this, everyone instinctively widened their eyes, seeing the gleam of gold reflected in each other's gaze. Compared to the early days of Baytown, the populace's labor capabilities and efficiency had improved significantly. The average monthly wage had risen from 6 silver coins to 10. With ongoing education in new skills and knowledge, wages were expected to increase further in the future. But even so, the fact that teachers were paid in gold coins was enough to excite everyone. For most ordinary people, becoming a professional seemed out of reach. Becoming a reservist or full-fledged soldier was already pushing their limits. Still, it didn't stop them from placing their hopes on the next generation, and it certainly didn't lessen their growing respect for teachers. Only the best can become teachers. That's how we'll nurture the finest students. Matthew's approach was simple, but left Ralph the butler deeply impressed. Watching the townsfolk eagerly spread the news, Ralph couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. Will we attract the best talent? The Lord's Manor. Matthew withdrew his gaze from the construction site next door and hummed a tune as he headed to the resting room. At this time each day, he would take time to personally tutor Liana. His diligent little student, Liana. She had given Matthew quite the pleasant surprise. After just over a month, she was already on the verge of successfully casting a zero-circle spell. It was clear that Liana took her studies very seriously. She hadn't slacked off, even in Matthew's absence. As expected, those who achieve great things must put in effort beyond the reach of most. Liana seemed to sense something, and turned to see Matthew's tall figure. Her previously cold face blossomed into a radiant smile. "Teacher, you're here." Chapter 172. Education Problems. Chapter 172. Education Problems. Matthew checked over Liana's progress, his face full of smiles. Her grasp of knowledge was solid and thorough, without blindly rushing to hasten spellcasting. A strong foundation is crucial for all knowledge, even more so for dangerous, arcane knowledge. After carefully reviewing her status panel, Matthew assigned her new learning tasks while pondering thoughtfully. Perhaps Liana also had a chance. Liana age, 9 profession, none talent, none specialization, none inheritance, none attributes strength, 5 right arrow 6 agility, 6 right arrow 7 constitution, 5 right arrow 6 intelligence, 14 right arrow 16 perception, 10 right arrow 11 charisma, 18 right arrow 19 luck, -2 doomed aura evaluation. Misfortune surrounds her, a life full of hardships. Thanks to Matthew's relentless support, Liana's attributes had notably improved. Particularly after more than 2 months of study, Liana displayed an astonishing talent. Those 2 points in intelligence were entirely earned through hard work and study. Given her current efforts and her resilient streak of bad luck, Liana could very likely raise her intelligence above 20 before she turned 15. Having extraordinary intelligence is one of the prerequisites for becoming an Arcanist. As a genius Arcanist himself, and with the aid of data display, Matthew understood the difficulty of becoming an Arcanist inside and out. However, Liana's charisma remained irrepressible, continuously manifesting its presence. Matthew even suspected that, if Liana continued to live well and thrive, her latent bloodline power would naturally emerge. Perhaps Liana was another sort of prodigy, destined to become a sorcerer. So, after some thought, Matthew decided to have a serious talk with young Liana about her future. When Matthew spoke with children, he never condescended, treating them as he would any citizen. Children are clever, they understand more than people think. After finishing her assignments, Liana adeptly asked Matthew her questions, then reflected deeply, showing an exceptional capacity for learning. Matthew patiently waited for her to process everything, then asked in a gentle tone, "The next question is important. It will shape your future path as a professional." Liana nodded thoughtfully, her eyes full of determination. Ensuring that she was clear-headed, Matthew explained the differences between an Arcanist, a wizard, and a sorcerer. Sorcerer, born with an innate ability to cast spells. Like breathing or moving an arm, you can wield your magic. For instance, some sorcerers are born with the ability to cast fireball. With practice, they can gradually unlock new powers, but sorcerers have a limit to their abilities, determined largely by their inherent talent. Objectively, you possess great talent. With the right guidance, you could immediately become a sorcerer. Out of 1,000 total power points, your talent alone could bring you to 800 within 20 years. Wizard studies the magic weave and spell mechanics, learning how to cast them more effectively. They research new spells and experiment with making them stronger or weaker. Theoretically, a wizard can learn everything a sorcerer can do. Objectively, after a few days of study, you could become a wizard and also gradually acquire sorcerer powers. Through diligent study, you have a good chance of reaching 900 power points in 20 years. Arcanist investigates the fundamental truths, laws, and mechanics of the universe. Why do we breathe? Why does parchment burn? What remains after it burns? These are all things we study. An Arcanist can learn all the powers of both wizards and sorcerers. It won't stop you from inheriting sorcerer abilities, but instead, it will help you understand and develop them further. Objectively, you'll need to put in even more effort, study more knowledge. And it'll take about a year of dedication before you can become an Arcanist. With hard work after 20 years, you could reach the full 1,000 points of power. After hearing Matthew's explanation, Liana fell into deep thought. First, immediate mastery of power. Second, a little bit of study over time could lead to mastering even stronger powers. Third, with long-term dedication and hard work, she could surpass her innate limits and acquire even greater power. Even for an adult, making such a decision would be difficult and stressful. Matthew remained silent, not interfering or saying things like, "You have enough talent to be more carefree. Whichever path you choose, you'll achieve great things." This would mean she wouldn't need to consume many resources or make great efforts and could naturally grow into her abilities. The path of easy growth. You could just study slowly without any pressure and grow at your own pace. This would involve using up some resources, the equivalent of supporting a spellcaster, but not too much. The simple education path. You could push past your limits, you have that potential. This would consume massive resources and put tremendous pressure on her. The pressure education path. Matthew didn't entertain any biased thoughts. Everyone must be responsible for their choices. Matthew merely wanted to inform Liana of what was to come. His aim was to ensure Liana wouldn't regret whatever choice she made. The young girl blinked, looked down at the books in her hands, and gripped them tightly. With firm resolve, she answered, "I want to grow through hard work little by little because that's what I can control." Surprised by her determination, Matthew couldn't help but nod approvingly, gently patting her head as he said, "All right. Then from now on, your studies will get harder. You'll need to learn even more, so give it your best effort." Seemingly more relaxed after making her decision, Liana lovingly stroked her books, looking up with eager eyes as she said, "I'm ready." Watching her serious expression, Matthew mused inwardly and then said in an encouraging tone, "I've found a great partner for you. You'll be learning together." Thinking of Yea's learning abilities, Matthew believed the two of them would be a perfect match. Curiously blinking, Liana seemed to realize something. She bit her lip and hesitantly asked, "Teacher, will she be affected by me?" "Huh? Ugh, sis. Want some of this?" Yaya had snuck in, her eyes darting away from Liana's books as she sheepishly held out a roasted chicken leg. Liana smiled helplessly, having already guessed Yaya's identity. After sneaking a glance at Matthew and getting his confirmation, she took the chicken leg with excitement. "I'll eat it. Since you're so kind to me, I'll definitely teach you well later." "Huh?" Yaya stood there dumbfounded, puzzled by this different response compared to Rebecca's reactions. "This isn't right." "Yeah." Chapter 173, Is Magic the First Productive Force? Chapter 173, Is Magic the First Productive Force? In just 10 days, the construction of the vocational academy and the recruitment of teachers became hot topics. These casual conversations soon spread the news far and wide. Many focused on the teaching positions, while others, thinking ahead, silently debated. How can one get into the vocational academy? Unable to reach Ralph the steward, many soldiers were pushed forward to subtly question old John. The latter smiled slyly and casually answered, "Any eligible child permanently residing in the Bay Territory can attend the academy." A seemingly ordinary statement, yet it excited everyone. However, some were more curious. So many children, can the academy handle teaching them all? Just how big is this academy going to be? With permission to reveal some inside information, old John colorfully responded, "How big? The entire undeveloped northern town area is part of the academy grounds, so don't fret. Start studying hard now, you might even become a teacher one day." Most people ignored old John's last comment, focusing instead on the mysterious academy under construction. However, their curiosity was mostly blocked by a towering 4-meter wooden fence, and few could glimpse inside. Currently, the work was being carried out by thousands of kobolds. Driven by whips and hearty meals, most new kobolds became exceedingly docile and worked diligently. Silver Fang, now smarter, studied the building blueprints in deep thought. From time to time, he turned to ask the chief architect questions. Initially, the team of architects was terrified of the kobolds, worried they might go berserk at any moment. But as time went on, the architects became increasingly adept at directing them. They soon realized these creatures had many excellent qualities. As long as they were well fed, the kobolds showed remarkable enthusiasm and stamina. Though they couldn't comprehend complex orders. Simple tasks, however, were completed with impressive efficiency. Especially digging, the kobolds handled it as naturally as eating or drinking. In just a few days, the foundations, including the sewers, were almost entirely dug out. Although there was still much work to be done, like laying bricks, flooring, reinforcing tunnels, and securing supports. The team was quite satisfied with the work efficiency. The better the quality, the faster the work, the greater the reward, to better harness the kobolds' labor. The building crew split into 2 shifts. A small team managed daytime work, while the majority oversaw the night. The kobolds didn't work in shifts. Instead, they rested during the day when they tired more easily, working from dusk till dawn. This way, they worked during their peak performance hours, recovering quickly and maintaining long work periods. What about the daytime downtime? Naturally, the human construction crew was called in to handle more technically demanding tasks. As for the heavy lifting, that was handled by several massive stone golems. These modified stone golems can restore some energy through ground contact, allowing them to work 6 hours a day and spend the rest of the time resting and recovering. Those were Matthew's words to Ralph the steward. Matthew thought using these low-energy recovery golems for this purpose was an efficient allocation. When Ralph handed over control of the stone and clay golems to the construction crew, the team was initially skeptical. But as the golems carried out orders perfectly, saving time and ensuring safety, the crew quickly decided the more golems the better. Besides this assistance, Matthew also had Ralph distribute a basic construction manual compiled by the players to the crew. A simple glance through these valuable insights convinced the crew to sign a contract immediately. After a few days of learning and applying the principles, they met Matthew's requirements for basic design work.